Hey, welcome back to the Blue Collar Off-Road Podcast, episode 139. I'm Graham. I'm here with Luke, Richie, and Cody. And we have Hans Scherer, the owner of XRock, or whatever. Yeah, you said something else on it, but you're the person in charge of it. You own it.
Yep.
And I'm personally not a huge XRock style wheeling nerd, but Cody loves that shit. And Luke likes it. I don't dislike it. I think you guys do some really cool shit, and the time trials and stuff are interesting. So, I don't know. Where do we want to start with all this?
Are you a go fast guy? Is that your thing?
I don't know. I just don't like cones. I'm not good at going through cones.
For what it's worth, the cones are kind of there to keep you honest in what we do. It's like a whole lot different. Like if you ever went to a XRock event or whatever where they set their cones at like 101 inches apart, that's not. You're not going to see that at one of our events. Our stuff's like Trailbreaker, where the cones are there to keep you honest. If you're hitting a cone, you're probably trying to cheat the line or doing something wrong. You're not, you know what I mean? It's not a cone dodging event by any stretch.
Gotcha.
Well, that's pretty cool, then.
I was mixing you up a little bit with XRock then, because I know they're very strict about that, and that's just what
they run classic format rules and all this stuff. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They just are doing, honestly, it's a totally different game. Like it's hard to even act like it's the same sport at this point. People do, but it's kind of not. I mean, like I said, the closest thing to what we do would be the, Little Rich's Trailbreaker out at Trail Hero that he does every year. It's pretty much, the East Coast version of that with a couple twists and turns and whatnot done in a series form. So.
Sweet. Well, where do we start here?
Let's go all the way back to the beginning. How the hell did you get into wheeling?
So
tell us a little bit about yourself too.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, guys. And I think it's going to set the tone for the rest of what we talk about here, honestly, because the way I got into wheeling, I'm going to go out on a limb and say is probably a lot different than the way most guys got into wheeling. I am originally an extreme sports athlete, right? I grew up riding BMX bikes, what I'd say semi-professionally. I don't know how old you guys are and if you have any interest in BMX or any of that kind of stuff. But we did dirt jumping and, street riding and stuff like that with guys like, Van Homan, Robbie Morales, Taj Mahalik, Joe Ridge.
Okay. Yep.
Those kind of guys. Those guys were all local to the area, and we dug trails and rode and, did whatever together. Derek Adams, the guy who founded Little Devil Clothing, if you're familiar with him. So, yeah, that's how I got into wheeling by way of, I grew up skateboarding, riding BMX, jumping dirt bikes, doing all that kind of actual extreme sports, cliff diving, you name it. Like, I never jumped out of airplanes, but pretty much anything short of that, actual, what I will call real extreme sports, as opposed to what rock crawling kind of is these days. So anyway, what that did for me, I guess, is put me in a situation where you hit a point in your life when you're competing in those sorts of events and doing that kind of stuff where you're pressing yourself hard enough that, you can go out and do tech stuff and do nose bonks off rails and things like that. You'll probably be all right. But if you're going to eventually start going big and hucking big tricks off of stuff, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to destroy a bunch of stuff. You're just, you're constantly, I don't know. You get to a point where you're old enough that you're either going to be I got to do this, which a lot of my friends did. Like I said, they went on Road Fools and went all over the world doing that sort of thing. Or you got to say, all right, enough is enough. I'm going to work a job and do whatever I'm going to do and try and, live a semi-normal life and not 100% commit to this. But it kind of crosses over in that, if you're going out and destroying your body, and then you're out of commission for 3 months because your knee's blown out, or, I've broken every bone in my body pretty much. 2 vertebrae in my back, my one arm 4 times, the other one twice, just countless, you name it. Cracked my skull open. It's just you get tired of doing that.
This sounds exactly like why I stopped riding dirt bikes and snowboarding as much as I used to, because then I have to go to work on Monday, and I can't just keep getting fucked up on Sunday or Saturday.
You got it, right? Exactly. At some point, you're like, I'm getting older, and like it takes longer for me to heal. Number one. Number two, I got adult responsibilities. I got to decide what I'm going to do, especially if you're going to like have a family and a kid and wife, and you're like, dude, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with this, right? So like, rock crawling to me was this thing. Like, so I didn't really do anything with off-road vehicles. From a kid, I always like, saw like, I grew up in that era of dudes with like big lifted square body Chevys with glass packs on them with like 40s and 42s and 44s. And it's like, that's cool. You got like a triple chrome roll bar bro with your KC lights on it and whatever. That's what you did back then. Like, multicolored shock boots on your mirrors, like Californicated nonsense. But anyway, that stuff was cool. And, when I was like 5, I always looked at those trucks going by. But like, there was no rock crawling. Rock crawling wasn't really a thing at that time. And, at least not on the East Coast. There might have been guys out West doing like stuff on the Rubicon and the early birth of like pirate board and stuff like that, real early. But there just wasn't like any sort of actual rock crawling to be had. Well, anyway, I, in typical, I guess whatever you want to call it, me fashion, I got kicked out of high school. I had to go to reform school. I got into it with everybody, man. I fought like cops, teachers, it didn't, whatever.
Typical skater kid. Makes sense.
Angry young man, like whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I ended up getting kicked out of high school, and I had to go to reform school. And when I went to reform school, it was like further out in the country from where I grew up. I grew up outside of Philly, about 15 miles southwest of the city. So it was pretty suburban, urban. But anyway, this reform school was out in the country, and it was like farm kids and stuff. And I went out there, and there were these guys who had like lifted mud trucks and stuff, and they'd go out. And of course, I hung out with these dudes, and they took me out, and I was like, okay, I can see where you're going with this. I can like extrapolate the connection here between like what I was into with like skateboarding and BMX and jumping dirt bikes and all that kind of stuff, and what's going on here with you guys. But you're like sloshing through mud holes, and you're trying to climb hills, and it's like, there's got to be a way to push this harder. You know what I mean? And that's, like I said, at that time, there was nothing on the East Coast going on with rock crawling. It just didn't exist. And so I'd open up like magazines, and I'd see some stuff. Like I remember I saw, what's his name? Grady McLeod. I don't know if I've ever heard of Grady, but Grady's Get Vertical Off-Road back in the day out in California. He had this like hammered, black with like puke green scallops, neon green scallops on the hood CJs, with boggers on it, of course, boggers on all the things back in those days. But
the classic 90s aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly. So, like big, ugly, like, 3-inch tube roll bar and stuff. Like there were a bunch of these rigs. And those guys, like you open up a picture and you see these guys driving on rocks. And it's like, wait, like you can do that? Like guys do this? This is a thing? Like this is where I need to be at. Like we need to be driving on, like that's cool. Like, so of course I started convincing these guys, I got my own truck and I'm like, yo, let's go do this. And they're like, you're crazy. Like you're just tearing stuff up. Cause you don't know when you're like new to this, you're like, you don't realize you need like skid plates and your drive shafts have to be made out of quarter wall tubing and stuff. Like, you're out there destroying stuff, and you're like, well, what, why can't I just hammer this into rocks? And it just works. And I guess it kind of worked from there, man. Grew. And yeah, that's from there, like the light bulb went on and I was like, all right, this is cool, but we need to turn this into an actual extreme sport. And that's when like XRock and the first inklings of like XRock with Ranch Pratt and Mark Peggy, they were like coming together and forming XRock, and pirate board was starting to be a thing and guys were talking about rock crawling. And I was like, man, this is where we need to be at. We need to like turn this into a legit extreme sport. So that's how I come at this, right? Which is a lot different than I think a lot of people come at it, at least from the people I've talked to. They're, they were kind of like the kids who played baseball. They were always like, hey, you should sign up for the baseball team. No, I'm good on that, bro. Like, I'll be, catch me on the roof of the high school, gapping over this, like, kink trail onto the, like, tranny on the other side. Like, it's just not the same stuff. So, anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I look at all of this. And that's why XRock is what it is and why I do things the way I do things. And that's kind of how I got into it, I guess.
I can definitely completely understand what you're saying, because back when I used to skateboard and BMX and all that, you'd be driving around and like you'd look to your side and be like, oh shit, you could definitely skate that, or you could do XYZ. Like every time that you're looking around at what people would just be like, oh, that's just a bench sitting next to like a planter box that's made out of concrete. But to us, it's like, oh shit, you could do like a sick kickflip onto that to like tail slide across it, whatever. So I kind of have that same idea when I'm out wheeling. Like, yeah, everybody goes for the like the main or quote unquote easy line to get through the trail, but then there's usually me like off to the side, halfway flipped over, being a dumbass because I wanted to try something cool just because I thought it was possible.
Rock crawling, yeah, it's the ultimate old guy like extreme sport that, like you were saying, allows you to go to work on Monday, right? Like, it's not like you can't get seriously hurt doing extreme rock crawling. It does happen. People have, gotten hurt and killed and whatever. But compared to like, jumping off a 100-foot cliff, doing double gainers into some old abandoned quarry, or, anything like that, it's eons away from that in like danger level. You know what I mean? You're surrounded by tubes, you're strapped in. As long as nothing comes in at you and crushes you, as long as the cage work holds up and doesn't collapse, as long as your belts work and all that, like, you're probably going to be all right. You're going to, flip the thing back over on its tires and off you go. And that appealed to me. Like, you could treat rock crawling like X Games BMX or motorcycle jumping or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing. It's just a way to do it without having to pay the price. Because if you're doing a backflip on a dirt bike over a big set of doubles 30 feet in the air and you mess up, like, you're paying for that. You're not going to work on Monday. You know what I mean? If you eat it. Whereas if you do some gnarly line in a rock crawler and you flop over and, you may, like, your shoulders may hurt from your harness or whatever, but, like, you're probably good. So, yeah, that's where that came from me.
I think the worst I ever did in a rock crawler was I had bad harnesses and rolled it, and I actually, like, ended up messing my spine up a little bit, but it wasn't long term.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You absolutely can injure yourself. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of the fact that what we do is dangerous, but, like, it's not. I don't know. It's just, it's relative, I guess, is the right word.
Oh, absolutely.
Less so than a lot of other things. So.
I mean, you could be going downhill on a skateboard, hit a stop rock, and then die from smashing your face into the ground. But like, at least with wheeling, like, you just hit a rock while you're driving, you're probably not gonna get that messed up.
No, you're not. I got out of skiing because I was going and I ended up wiping out and I cracked a helmet front to rear, and I was like, okay, well, that was enough for me. Right. And I kept going with skiing for another couple years, but, like, after that, it was never the same.
Right.
Whereas rock crawling, it's like, yeah, I rolled a Jeep a while ago, and here we go. I'm continuing on, and still love it.
Yeah, and so what's interesting, I guess building off of that piece of the conversation, is the people are different, I think. Like, what is weird to me that always never quite, like, meshed is that guys call rock crawling an extreme sport. You know what I mean? Like, WeRock is World Extreme Rock Crawling and Off-Road Champion. That's the, like, acronym for that. And it's like, to call something like that an extreme sport is kind of a misnomer, when you look at the guys. Like, the guys who actually do extreme type of stuff, when you grow up with those guys, it's like the mentality is so different from the group of guys that we have in the sport now. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some guys who are extreme sports type of, like, athlete type of people that do rock crawling and rock sports and whatever you want to call it. But a lot of them, like, you know, like you were saying about looking at that ledge and being like, yeah, so I can totally kickflip the Smith on that or feeble or whatever. And it's like, okay, when we were digging trails and doing whatever, it's like the type of people that you had to, I don't know, you had to be motivated and really want to do this stuff. Like, none of it was legal. You were going somewhere into the woods on somebody else's property and, you know, finding a spot to dig holes, and, you know, you'd have 40 guys working together on this, trying to keep it secret so nobody found out where you were at or any of that sort of thing. And, you know, everybody would pick up a shovel and start working. And, you know, there were guys that, like, took charge and said, this is what we're going to do here. But, like, everybody worked together. You had a lot of motivated people that got a lot of stuff done.
Dude, that brings back crazy memories. Back in the day, we used to have this spot called the Tinkham Track. And literally, we just got like 8 to 10 of us out there, just started digging. At one point, we had like a nice little double that we made like a fire pit in the center. And yeah, of course, we were dumb and jumped over the fire like morons. But like, hey, it was late in the fall season. It was cold out, and we wanted to stay warm and make some cool photos.
There you go.
And like, so that just brought back a lot of nostalgia back in the day.
But yeah, funny. I mean, it's like those kind of people, right? Like those guys, I don't know how to describe people like that, but like I've been involved in all these different extreme sports. That's your typical, like what I'll call extreme sports athlete, you know, like somebody like Travis Pastrana or whatever. Like those guys have a mentality about them that it's like they're dedicated to what they do. They're serious about it. And like, I don't know, they're just no nonsense type of people.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, man. If you
I was gonna say a great example would be like Scotty Kramer. He was kind of not a super old school BMX rider, but about 10 years ago it was like his pro like shine. He got into a really bad accident, ended up getting paralyzed, and ever since the guy has just been nonstop riding his bike, and now he's actually trying to compete in like racing BMX in like the Paralympics now, which is just like, it's mind blowing. Where some people just be like, all right, this is my end. I'm not doing this anymore, but these extreme sports guys are fucking whacked out, and they're like, I want to keep doing this shit regardless if I can't feel my toes.
It's something you define yourself by, right?
Yeah.
And that's what everybody, it's like, you know, you're not like Trevor is like, damn, Hans, you're so intense with everything. Like, why are you like that? It's like, it's just how you are. Like, you're not trying to be that way. It's just how all those guys are. And so, like, the craziest thing, the strangest, and I'll say the most frustrating thing coming into our sport from that, because I'm like, oh, cool, extreme sports. It's going to be extreme sports guys. Well, 90% of the guys that are in our sport are not extreme sport guys. Like, they're just not. Like, they're I don't know, they're different. I don't know how to explain it unless it's like you come from that culture of extreme sports guys. But it's like they're wrapped up in politics, like all that stuff. Like I was saying, I mean, if you're a guy who's going out and saying, well, what are you doing this weekend? All right, well, we're going to sneak into this quarry, and we've like been scoping it out, and we're going to film some dudes like doing some big gnarly gainers off the top of this thing 120 feet out, whatever. Okay. Like, anybody who's doing that is not like coming home and being like, yo, did you see, like, they can't find fingerprints on, like, the bag of Coke in the White House? Like, you know what I mean? It's just not something that, like, they're not those kind of guys. Whereas, like, I swear, with rock crawling, it's like everything is political. Like, you can't get anything done without, like, just insane amounts of politics, internal nonsense that's, like, entrenched stuff that goes way back. And, you know, like, I'll get guys that call me, and they'll be like, hey, so-and-so posted this. Did you see this? Like, yo, that's messed up. Somebody should say something about it. And I'm like, okay, why don't you go say something about it? And they're like, well, I can't do that. But, you know, like, what are you worried somebody's going to be upset with you? Like, are you, like, you might hurt somebody's feelings? Like, I don't know. Like, you just called me and told me that you think this is jacked up. Well, yeah, well, then if I do that, so-and-so is going to, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's the difference. Extreme sports guys, like, they don't operate like that. They wouldn't call me. They'd, like, you know, come right at the dude that they're, like, having beef with, you know? It's just different type of people. That makes things tough with our sport. So I think the direction we need to go, honestly, is to try to involve more of those extreme type of people that are actually extreme like that. The new blood, we need to bring, like, because if you are a 12-year-old kid, right, and you are blasting backflips on your 80cc two-stroke dirt bike over some big double 30 feet in the air, if you put that kid in a rock crawler for a week, you know he's going to figure out how to operate that thing at some level of competency, and he'll be able to go out and do what he needs to do. I mean, he may not be the world's best rock crawler after a week, but extreme athletes are extreme athletes. I think that's the direction we need to go, and that's what's lacking. You know what I mean? We're pushing so hard, and it's like, not saying that some of our guys aren't legit, you know, like that, but it's like, as a whole, most of these guys that do this are just not, I mean, I don't want to use the word soft, but they're not like true extreme sports athletes. Let's say that.
Well, I think there's also a bit of an age component to it too, right? Like, I'm not going to try and be a dick about it, but a lot of people in this sport are like older. You know, you run into
one of them,
that.
man, yeah. I'm going on 45, you know? Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I've mellowed out a bit. I used to be a much bigger asshole 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Richie can attest to that. Cody can attest to that.
You
now
stopped being an asshole?
I'm a lot more laid back than I was.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I'm not as in your face about it, but I think that due to some of the demographics of the sport, you struggle with it because you have gearheads and also people that just kind of picked it up as like, it's one of the most complicated sports to pick up, but also one of the easiest, right? Because it can start with like just buying a, 2008 JK, and then all of a sudden here you are 10 years later with buggy on stickies that like the back of your hand. So I think that's where some of the extreme sport with that mentality just doesn't get translated over.
It's a lifestyle thing for a lot of people that come into it from like I don't know, I'll call it like a country rural type of thing. You know, like guys got into this as like, they're corn-fed type of country guys that want to do this because that's what you do. You listen to country music and you go mud bogging in your truck, and like it kind of evolves from that. They were not looking to be like, and that's why when you hear all these guys talk about our sport, like especially if we're gonna, as I said, I really think, and this is no disrespect to We Rock or anything like that, I feel like at this point you can't really talk about what they're doing and what we're doing and act like it's the same thing, because it's kind of not. But like, especially when you hear those guys talk, like all the We Rock competitors, they're always talking about, oh man, it's like, it's so great family, and we go there and like, we take our kids and everybody barbecues and we're friends with these people and it's so great. And it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's important. I'm not saying that it's not, but like, that's the angle that they're coming at this from. It's camaraderie and recreation for them, as opposed to extreme pro caliber upper echelon extreme sports competition, which is where I'm coming from. And that's the disconnect and the constant struggle I have with so much of this, I think.
That's understandable. And kind of to go back on what you were saying, Luke, the age thing, I feel like I'm one of the weird ones in this in that topic, for the example of with BMX or dirt bikes or skateboarding, snowboarding, XYZ, like you can pretty much replace everything on those objects with hand tools without any stress.
Sure.
With Jeeps, it's like you almost have to have that outside push, whether it being like uncles, dad, whatever, to help you with that. But then to also bring it back to with what you were saying,
you don't need it.
Yeah, you're right. You can just, a little gum. You can make a cage. Yeah, absolutely, buddy.
Well, there's a mechanical aspect to it that's like beyond basic, simple. Like there's a chain and a sprocket, and this has to turn this. I get it. There's you have to understand how motors and transmissions and that sort of thing. You have to have some basic working knowledge of that type of stuff that you wouldn't need for many other things. But dirt bikes and whatnot, you need that. If it's any motorized sport, you need that.
But also, what I was trying to come up with the idea of when you mentioned the kid with the 85cc dirt bike doing a backflip, do we even think that rock crawling would be their like what they would gear towards? You know what I mean? Because if we're thinking about the younger generation and what they're coming up with, and I don't know, we could get super boomer and be like, "Oh, these iPad kids, man," if we really want to. But
No.
like,
you nailed it, bud. That's it. That's like, so you look at every other sport. We have to evolve as a sport, and that's the part of this that like you get extreme pushback whenever you want to try and make changes, and that's part of the politics of what I'm talking about internally. But like, you look at monster trucks, for instance, right? Okay, they're like rock crawlers. I mean, it's a mechanical thing with a motor and four-wheel drive and whatever, a roll cage surrounding it. It's basically a bigger version of the same thing, more powerful, whatever. But like, those guys are airing those things out like 50 feet in the air. They're doing like backflips and landing in a wheelie, and then like, you know, doing another backflip in succession after landing from the backflip. Like, there's no reason that you couldn't be doing stuff that's considerably more extreme than what we're doing. Going back, like when I originally came up with the plan for XRock, you know what I mean? This is 20 some years ago. I've had this sitting on it and I've been waiting for a time to roll it out. There's a lot of things I talked about. Spec classes, man, I made a bunch of enemies with that. Everybody hates the idea of spec classes, like having all the chassis be the same and like the links and whatever, which make a ton of sense because if you're tearing up cars and doing extreme stuff, now you can get it from any one of 10 different places. You can stock a link. You just say, yeah, I need an upper, you know, front upper passenger side link for an XRock car, you know what I mean? And not only that, it drives, you know, costs down. Everybody can resell their vehicles. There's a million and one good reasons why you would do something like that. You know, it allows so much. It allows us to showcase what drivers can and can't do. It allows us to showcase what manufacturers are better than others. If you want to say, hey, my tire works better than somebody else's tire, there's no better way to do that than having it on the exact same car as somebody else who has a different company's tire on there. And that, of course, forces manufacturers to evolve and make better products. And that's how you push stuff forward. There's a lot of people who don't want that to happen. There's a lot of people, like I said, if you get into the internal side of our sport, there's a lot of long-standing, you know, historical entrenchment, whatever you want to call it. And that is the hardest thing to push past. But yeah.
So I'm not throwing shade here. I'm picking random companies because they are big. Well, not random, but yeah, it would really suck if there was a set class and you had crawlers, treps, and swampers all running against each other on the exact same spec car that weighed in at basically the same minus the difference in tires, and then all of a sudden the treps are losing or the crawlers are losing because now that company looks like shit, where they can't go and charge $1,500 a tire, which is just fucking ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to different parts of this. And like, man, you know, we don't have to, I'm sure most of the people that are listening to this or whatever, they're not on that like inside part of the industry conversations that take place. And they probably don't care about most of this. But like, yeah, there's a lot of different angles and a lot of reasons why different people, I mean, like fabricators, right? Like, so let's say you have a chassis, right, that works, we'll say better than everybody else's. We'll just use that term, right? Now you have something that you are marketing and it's yours, and you can be the Pablo Picasso of, you know, this is my creation and I have it and it stomps ass on everybody else's stuff, right? Well, why would that guy want to come together and work with 4 or 5 other guys and create a product that's standardized? So, you know, he's no longer at an advantage. He's basically removing his advantage. You know what I mean? Now,
yeah,
it would be better for the sport. And you could keep 2 classes. You could have an unlimited, like exponential, whatever, experimental class that you, however you want to word that. But a spec class absolutely makes sense. You know, we're 15 years away from something like that happening realistically. I've almost gave up on it, but it's like the last thing in my piece of this that I've originally wanted to make work going back 20 plus years, arguing with people about this. And if it never happens, it never happens. But I do firmly believe, and I'll go, to my deathbed thinking that like the sport would benefit from that. It would absolutely allow us to, we could create courses that, showcase exactly what these vehicles can and can't do. And like I said, which drivers, if driver A makes it up that line and driver B is not in the same car, and that's not to say like shock tuning and, link geometry like settings and things like that. There are things that like would be tunable that would allow to change some of this, but realistically, you're about as close to apples as you can get. You know what I mean? And that would do a lot for the sport, because we could gear things exactly towards that and create a product that everybody can follow and everybody can watch. And you could do some really cool stuff. And you could do all kinds of stuff with it. You could set it to pyrotechnics. Not that I'm like a gimmick guy by any stretch of the imagination, but you could have like heavy metal music playing and laser light shows and stuff and do it in an arena, and people would think that's cool. I mean, when I say people, I mean the average guy, not
population.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So you can market that. It's something you can market more large scale. And when you're trying to make money and you're trying to talk to sponsors and you're trying to grow things, these are those type of inside conversations that, get brought up. And that's the stuff people don't realize. So much of our people, going back to like the mindset, the true extreme type of athletes, real extreme type of people, they're not at each other's throats. I mean, they may have problems and guys will like fist fight each other or whatever, but they're not like politically trying to stab each other in the back and have like ulterior motives and it's like there's none of that nonsense side of things, which we have in our sport. Unfortunately, there's so much like underhanded, backhanded stuff that works. Again, it's a hell of a challenge, and it's something that I'm not used to. Like I said, coming from the like true extreme sports X Games type of arena of things, nobody else behaves like this. This is unique. It's a unique challenge to what we have, and I think we need to try and do some house cleaning internally. One of the biggest things we need is a drivers association. But, unfortunately, everybody says, yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. I tried to do something like this years ago when I was on the opposite end of this, when I was competing myself, when I had my fab shop and was building crawlers and doing all that and running them in XRock and WeRock and whatnot. And everybody was like, Hans is trying to destroy the sport. He's trying, like they labeled me as this like communist, like they're like, you're trying to turn this into a union thing and this, that, and the other. It's like, buddy, I'm just trying to organize things. And so of course, all these guys are like, when you're on the other side of things, you'll understand that that's a threat. You're trying to overthrow our ability to make decisions and, bullshit. Like, I don't want to hear it. Because here I am on the other side of things and I'm still tooting that same horn. I want a drivers association. I want you guys. Because, like, guys will argue about dumb stuff like window nets. We should have window nets. We should make them mandatory. Then, like, a year later, everybody's like, well, I'm not showing up if you make me put a window net in. All right. So, and then they start sending me links. Well, such and such class doesn't make you run window nets, and they change this. And it's like, all right, guys, get organized. Like, why don't you put something together and we'll get an official, like, position on this? You guys talk within yourselves, amongst yourselves, and tell me what you want to see out of this. We'll review the data and we'll have a ruling. And it's like, okay, this is sanctioning body interfacing with the drivers association, symbiotically trying to work together to create a better sport. Well, of course, nobody wants to do that because that's work. Like,
it's too much effort.
You guys know, right? Like, I mean, you're doing work. Like, people make light of it, but like doing these podcasts, this requires organization. It requires getting people together, doing work, getting all this stuff edited, doing, what you guys do. Well, that's what I'm saying about that motivational difference between true extreme sports guys that want to be out digging holes in the woods when it's pouring rain and, not getting paid and not doing anything versus the drivers we have now going, Hans will take care of that. Like, whatever. If it's not exactly how I want it, I'm not showing up. They don't see the quantum leap of benefits that we've made and changes in the sport. And now we're paying out 10 grand for this event and whatever. And it's always like, whatever. Like if it's not exactly how I want it, like, I'll take it or leave it. And,
and on that note, when you brought up some of the podcast stuff, just for some quick background stuff before what I say here, it's about 7.5 hours worth of work goes into putting out 2 hours worth of content, including the recording.
I believe it. Well, and there's 4 of you guys that have to work
It's
together.
longer than that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's more than that. Exactly. Yep.
Like just to put in perspective alone for the oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on his name. The Flex Rocks and Rollovers. Like that episode, I was working on recording for 8 hours straight. And then you take into factor the 3 hours of recording, and then you got to factor in Graham's efforts of making the pictures. It's way more than 7 hours.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and then the 7 hours was a very basic spitball average for a simple to edit episode that goes for like 2 hours. That was what I was kind of guessing with.
Okay, I can respect
that. We do all that
though.
internally ourselves for like our artwork and whatnot. We have an artist that does all our flyers and whatnot. People don't realize any of that. You know what I mean? Yep. I think that stuff just magically materializes out of thin air or something. And so, I get it, man. I 100% follow where you guys are coming from with that.
And then you'll get people that'll be like, oh, well, you didn't discuss this, or you did something a little bit different when they're talking to us about it. And it's like, of course we're going to do something a little bit different. We can't talk about rock crawling every single episod. And,
sure.
Well, we can. We definitely can.
Well,
yes, with me around, we can't.
But you know what I mean, though? Like, we talked with Eric about steering, and we talked about Tesla swapping stuff. That was a fucking cool episode. The episode we did with River City Rally was fucking cool too. And those are totally separate spheres, right? Because they're not exactly rock crawling.
Dude, rally is a gnarly sport. I'm going to tell you right now. So like those guys are extreme sports athletes through and through. Like, so my lineage, I guess, my history, my mother's side of the family is from Finland, over in Scandinavia. And you know how we have like baseball is America's national pastime sport, whatever you want to call it. Theirs is rally racing, right? I'm sorry, like Finland has a 10 times cooler national sport than we do. Anybody who likes baseball, no offense, but dude, rally racing at 120 miles an hour through like the woods next to trees, like come on, dude. Like that's gnarly. And so like they'll train those kids from like 5 years old. They'll put them. Finland's the land of 1,000 lakes, right? Or 10,000 lakes, I think. It's whatever. They have lakes everywhere. So it gets cold. A portion of it's up above the Arctic Circle. Well, in the winter, those guys will go plow the middle of the lake out with a course, and they'll take old Volkswagens and knock all the glass out of them, and take like young 5-year-old kids and set them up so they can reach the pedals, and teach them to just go out there and bash into each other and slide into snowdrifts and figure out how to drive a car. The limits on that stuff. That's what you do when you're 5. Again, that's like where I come from. That's that extreme side of things that's missing like in so many of our athletes. So yeah, dude, rally guys for sure. Hats off
nut
to them.
jobs.
Dude, yeah, they're not playing. Yep, they are not screwing around.
Another cool episode was with Caleb from We Rock. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's probably 6 to 7 guys now that have hit me up about the about what Beeman G with the rock crawling on the video game. Like, it is insane how we can like talk about other than rock crawling. Granted, it's still kind of rock crawling just on a video game, and then like a few other guys are like, "Ooh, I'm interested. What's this about? Can you tell me about it?" And I don't know. It's pretty fucking cool to see.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that sort of thing, but I've seen screenshots of it and guys talking about it. I guess Caleb makes like courses, like renderings of like actual courses and stuff. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Like, it's interesting.
Caleb and his name's Tom. He does I think it's Rough Country Crawling is the name of his server and all that. Those two guys together, they are just masterminds, because Caleb does understand like suspension geometry, but Tom can do all like the building and like the different points of contact with the like it is very, very impressive what those two dudes can do together. It's really cool.
It's cool. Yeah. It's a new generational thing, you know what I mean? Doing things via simulation or whatever is definitely not something we were. I mean, guys talked about stuff like that. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could have like a video game that was realistic? But like now it sounds like those guys are achieving that within pretty good.
Yes.
So.
And the part I think that's cool is I think that is one of the ways that the sport, if you will, is going to leave the rural areas and start spreading, because it, you can run that game on a $600 laptop. It's not going to run perfect, but and then you can get into that because it's cool and you saw a YouTube clip, and then all of a sudden, like, you're 16 and you're starting to look at vehicles and stuff, and it's not as far of a stretch as it used to be.
As a training tool, it makes a ton of sense. I don't think it'll ever completely, replace real rock sports. But you look at like NASCAR, you know what I mean? Those guys are doing simulator racing and things like that. There's no risk, you know what I mean? There's cost certainly associated with it, but you're not worrying about people hitting a wall at 200 and some miles an hour and getting killed. So from that standpoint, may not be super interesting to spectate, but it is absolutely, from an insurance standpoint, which is a huge factor. That's another piece of this we don't have to really get into because nobody probably cares. But trust me when I say that side of it is, so many people don't realize how much they are holding on by a thread. I just had this conversation with Liam O'Donnell of USAC. I don't know, if you guys know Liam, but he's the actuarial side of insurance, man. For what we do, it's like, there's an entire government entity dedicated to keeping people out of abandoned mining operations, this whole stay out, stay alive. And what we're doing is like, let's bring the general public in here and have a sport. Like you look at the insurance form and it's like, okay, the short form is like 13 pages long typically, you know what I mean? And it's like, it gives you this list of all this garbage where it's like, are there any like cliffs that people could fall? Oh yeah, we got those, dude, everywhere. Like, is there any water-filled pits, the deep water where drowning could occur? Yep, got those too. Like literally every single thing you could check on this form for insurance problems, it's like we got that times 10, bro. So anyway, it's so the simulation side of things does have its place, absolutely, especially for like getting into it.
Yeah, my big thing about it is it's not the same. It's never going to be the same because you're never going to have the full feeling.
I agree.
But it's excellent for getting people interested.
They use it for commercial
in that direction.
That's a conversation I should have with Ricky Barrett. You guys know him, I assume.
We just talked to him last week.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him if he's ever done any of that simulation stuff because I know they do that for pilot training and whatnot. So.
Funny thing, we talked with him for like 2.5 hours. Not a single mention of flying. I don't know how that happened.
Well, I mean, it's not rock crawling, and
Yeah.
I'm just all over the place. Don't mind me. You guys can try and bring this back on track. That's okay. I'm rambling.
So like, I suppose, what exactly is XRock? Because we've talked about it's an extreme sport, but like, what is it?
So XRock is my idea going back 20 some years to try and create I think what the sport needs, moving in the direction. As I said, Little Rich Klein has done some of this with his Trailbreaker format, which, I messaged him as soon as he put that together. And I said, man, this is what the sport needs. This is the direction that, I've wanted to go for years. And, that's where I think we need to go. It's a simplified, I don't want to say dumbed down, but like for the sake of regular viewing public understanding, like if you look at classic rock crawling rules, all of this stuff is like, well, this guy backed up one time more than this guy, but this guy hit a cone, and it's like nobody can figure out who's winning. Nobody can figure out like why anything is happening. Now, why did this guy drive through this one and not this one? And it's like it's just a lot to spend. And not only that, the way they set their gates, it makes you. It creates a situation where it behooves you to take like 5 minutes to try to sneak through a gate, missing it by a half inch without taking a backup, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to watch this. I mean, I hate to say it, but like, I love our sport. I'm a guy who is like fanatical about every part of what we do with rock sports and off-roading. I don't want to. I can't watch that. Like, I watched like a piece of footage from the Kazars event at Dayton, and I was like, man, this is like, it's hard. It's hard to spectate, and so XRock aims to solve a lot of these problems. Plus, we have massive judging problems in our sport as a whole. So one of the big things that I do differently, we have our own core group of people. And these are great people, man. These are guys that get behind what we're doing. They understand the concept of what we're doing. They come out to all our events. That guy is going to be the one who's judging you. He's going to be the one holding and signing your scorecard. He's going to be the one doing the recovery when your vehicle's upside down, working with you to figure out how to get it out of there without tearing it up. It's those same people. And every person interacts with those same people, and you get to know them and this, that, and the other thing. If you look at We Rock, it's always different judges. They show guys like a 10-minute video, and they say, all right, you're good to go. You now know, like, you're equipped to judge. Well, I'll stand there and watch guys on course, and it's like, well, that's a backup. That's another backup. All right, they missed 4 backups and didn't say anything on that course. They run like 4 courses a day for 2 days. That's now you got 32 points of spread in difference from your 4 backups that were missed. Some guy, got second place who should have got 7th place because of that 30-point spread. You know what I mean? And if we're handing out $10,000, which is another piece of this that I think we need to be doing, we need to have proper payouts to have the sport be taken seriously. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that $10,000 is life-changing for any of these guys that have these vehicles. If you're building these things and you're hauling them across the country and paying for fuel and all that stuff, you don't need $10,000. I mean, not that anybody minds getting $10,000, but it's not about the money. But what $10,000 does is cause the average Joe watching to look at this and go, wow, this is a legitimate conversation. Like, this is guys running for money. They're actually doing something. Things like that. So all of these things are things that I set out to do with XRock. I wanted to create a better version of what we've been doing. And it was like, I'm not ragging on our sport as a whole. Like, I competed going back in the day to like the late 90s, early 2000s when it first started, and stuff was cool. There were guys setting quality terrain, and there was cool stuff being done. It was on ESPN2, and it was going somewhere. And there's a bunch of reasons. Again, that's more internal hoopla as to why that fell apart. But we went through this real dark age where, like, it kind of became a joke. Like, you guys got XJs, right? You all run out, and I'm sure you wheel, like, what you guys consider to be pretty hard stuff when you're so inclined to do so. You take your XJs out and hammer on them and whatever. Mm-hmm. You guys should not, like, I get calls all the time where guys call me and say, Hans, I watched this, that, and the other thing from a competition. Those gates are easier than the stuff we ran last weekend with my buddy's Cherokee, like, out in the mountain. Like, that should not be like that. The upper echelon pinnacle of our sport should be guys putting vehicles through hard terrain. Should be the best guys with the most skill, with the best equipment, competing for money, doing whatever. Now, we have an amateur class. It's SLRC, which started life as street legal rock crawling, although I keep saying Eric, the guy who owns that, he works with me on stuff. I keep saying he should change it to Sport League Rock Crawling or Summer League Rock Crawling, because now he's got an open class where guys don't need street legal vehicles anymore, but in addition to the street legal class. But
were they the guys that ran at Roush and hosted some of those competitions?
That is Ron Lind and Ron Lobb, who most people know colloquially as the Rons in the sport. They are guys who have been doing this for a long time going back. They work with Bruce Shallis, the owner of Roush Creek, to put those competitions on. They do a great job with that. That's their classic form rock crawling too. But their amateur competitions, bring a lot of people. They get like 40 some cars usually that come out for those things. And that's It's RC Rocks is, I guess, what they're still calling it, but it's not exactly the same as when RC Rocks was a thing years ago. But I think it's still RC Rocks. I think that's what they call that. So.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, like, look at my goal for XRock is to create that serious pro caliber event. That's what we need. We need, and of course there's all these people that are worried about getting left behind. They say, well, then I can't run that. It's like, well, I hate to say it, but like not everybody can play professional baseball. Not everybody is in the NBA. You know what I mean? That's why they have farm leagues and stuff like that. It's like, there's not like a better or a worse, but if you want to grow the sport and you want to represent it as such, like we have to get to a point, if you want industry involvement, where you have a product that is taken seriously and marketed as such. And that is what XRock is. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not, it's not about fun. It's not, like I said, all that happens, just
organically,
exactly. It's part of it. You still have that. You still have those times where you say, remember that time when we were in Kansas City and such happened? And you're always going to have that. It's guys are going to do what they're going to do, but that's not the focus. It's not load up your wife and kid and we're all going to sing Kumbaya and it's not what we do. Like I'm trying to do hardcore serious rock crawling where we're putting cars through the hardest stuff and pushing the sport. And we need those guys that want to do that want to evolve the sport, that want to stuff that you couldn't run last year. Now we're going to run it. We're going to change car engineering and we're going to build better cars and we're going to change driving styles and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and guys are building these electric cars now. I've been saying for years, I want to see motor on axle electric cars. I know there's a couple in the works.
Yes, that's so cool. I'm in. Sign me up.
I'm not an RC crawler guy. I have no problems with what those guys do. I'm just saying I don't specifically know much about it. I know a couple guys who do it, and it's like you look at what those things can do. If you look at the motor on axle like cars, not like the scalar stuff, but the like true hardcore extreme comp guys that are running motor on axle cars, those things can do things that are just flat out amazing. So, you could never dream of doing, for multiple reasons, like the power to weight ratio is just unattainable and whatnot in a full size car when you 1-to-1.
I have seen Graham with his RC Jeep. I will never, ever support Graham building a 1-to-1 electric vehicle ever. That dude is fucking dangerous. Like, I hope you hit your ankles because he's coming for him. Like,
he's power, man. Yeah, power. You do so much for that. Like, so motor on axle, you can have infinite split, like instantaneous torque split for front dig or rear. You can under and overdrive. So, like, if you want your front to go 12% faster than your rear or whatever, like, there's so much you can do with that. You have, at some point the suspension stops working and, whatever, but you have no limitations of drive shaft angles. You have nothing like that to worry about. You can basically just have things anywhere you want them. That's absolutely the direction that I think we need to go. Things like that. And those are the conversations I have behind the scenes with people where we're pushing things and whatever, but there's a lot of cool stuff in the works. But again, if you're going to have guys that are willing to do that sort of stuff, you have to have a sport to support that people are going to take seriously. So you're not just doing this to say you did it. Like, there has to be a reason to do this. So,
honestly, I agree. And not to mention with the whole EPA bullshit that was going on for a while, I don't know how much it's calmed down now with not being able to modify off-road vehicles or modify VIN tagged vehicles for off-road use. Electric vehicles might be the wave of the future, which Elon can say whatever the fuck he wants. I don't see it in the next 25 years even being possibly feasible, but it's not a bad idea that if this is the sport we enjoy, thinking about the future with it.
I think battery-powered vehicles, I'm just going to give you my take on this. This is not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just where I'm coming from with it. I think the concept of trying to run battery-powered vehicles as daily drivers on the street for stuff like that is absolutely ludicrous. I don't understand how people are wanting to do something like that. Like, there are other options, like, hydrogen fuel cell, something like that kind of makes sense. you know, there's barriers to and problems to everything. But
explosions.
I mean, yeah, well, but I mean,
Lindenberg or Hindenburg.
Lithium batteries that's some nasty stuff, and you mining it. Yeah, anyway, there's a lot of. It makes sense for what we do for competition rock crawling. Going to electric vehicles for that absolutely makes sense. Going to electric vehicles to have a tractor trailer drive your Amazon order to your door, like, no, I don't see, me personally, I just don't see that.
Well, that's what the drones are for. They will drop the packages off, you know?
But I don't know, there's a lot of things like when you look at that side of development of things, you brought up the whole, you know, this bullshit about guys saying you can't modify cars. I agree that, like, I mean, there's always going to be guys that are going to do stuff on the sly. You're not allowed to delete your diesel pickup truck, but guess what? There's a bunch of them out there that are deleted. You're not allowed to do heroin, but people figure out how to do that too, right?
No, you can do heroin. You can't sell it.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, to speak on that really quick, a friend of mine was trying to buy shocks yesterday for her JK, and she got the weirdest error when she went to buy it. What's the name of the company here? Dang it. I think is it Four Wheel Parts? It's a very common like Wrangler website, and they literally said in the receipt, it says, "We do not sell lift kits over 2 inches to Massachusetts," and it literally removed both of the shocks, even though they were for stock height. They removed it from her order and would not sell it to her.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Wait, what?
I mean,
that's a thing now?
Yeah, I have to look up the website that I was looking at.
Over intrusive. I mean, is there like a radio button you could check to say that, like, you're not using this for an on-road application or something? I don't know. That seems crazy to me. But
wild.
You know what I mean? To play devil's advocate, I'm probably the guy who would say that our sport would actually benefit from any kind of crackdown on guys being able to do stuff to their vehicles, because what it would do is it would open up a market for guys to sell mass production off-road only vehicles. Like, they kind of tried this with the Roxor with Mahindra, you know what I mean? And it's not really the right vehicle for that or whatever, you know what I mean? But, like, so you look at side-by-sides. Side-by-sides are like made out of bubble gum and paper mache. I don't know how.
Literally.
But, like,
take roll cages too while we're at it.
But no, I mean, you look at that, right? Like, if you had big companies and whatnot in a position where you could make and sell mass market rock crawling vehicles that are serious rock crawling vehicles, you could do that. And people would say, hey, yeah, this is an option. I can make this, I can sell it, I can buy it. But that's not going to happen as far as expanding into the mainstream market if guys are allowed to continue to, like, easily tinker with their Jeeps and stuff. Because that's where so many people come into it, and then that's where they stop. Or they, like, everybody I know who started with a Jeep, they kind of looked at the tube chassis crawler stuff as existing, but, like, that's something else. That's not what I do. That's not for me. Like, those guys are cool and they're out there doing that, but I'm going to pretend that doesn't exist, or I'm going to just say, like, that's unattainable for me. That's not something that, you know, unless you grow up with, like, your uncle or your dad or somebody who's in this sport, most of the guys that I talk to, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you know, you guys may feel otherwise, and that's fine, but, like, most of the guys I talk to, when they start with Jeeps, they're like, yeah, that's so far removed from what I'm looking at that, like, I just am going to pretend that doesn't exist. Like, that's cool. That's it. And then eventually, if they hang around what we're doing and come to comps and whatever, they're like, why did I ever build this thing? I should have just started with Jeep. You know what I mean? And
so many people that we know, like, now the really far end guys are all saying that. Almost every single one. It's just like, I should have just started with the crawler. Like, there's no point to this.
Oh yeah, I mean, and like I said, playing devil's advocate, and I'm not saying that I want to see this happen, but I honestly do think the only way something like that's going to take place is if you create the problem. So if they really do crack down and start saying, oh, you can't modify, there's still going to be people that are going to do it. There's still going to be people that will find loopholes. There's still going to be off-road, whatever. You're still going to be able to do it. But if you make it intrusively difficult to do that for the average guy, suddenly a market is going to pop up for guys that want to do this. That's a plug and play. Like, I'm just going to buy this and that's that. And that may not be the worst thing. That's all I'm saying.
I think personally that that would be one of the worst things that could happen overall, because like as much as we all talk about, especially like, you know, in this, Graham and myself, you know, the amount of work that goes into keeping our heavily modified Jeeps on the road or on the trail, it was the stepping stone that got me in. If it was not as readily accessible, I would not
That's what I'm saying. It
be.
would be readily accessible. That's what I'm saying. You're looking at it now like how it is now. But imagine if you could buy a rock crawler the way you could go buy a Can-Am X3.
or
Right?
like
I
a
wouldn't
dirt
want
bike.
that.
Or
No,
a dirt
no,
bike.
Yeah, I'm
take
out.
into
problem with that is you need the super low price point to get
No.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. So just to take in consideration, dirt bikes. Dirt bikes are like, they come out of the box ready to go onto a track. That is how they are sold. I mean, yes, the level of entry for once you get really into it is much higher than off-roading currently. But you have to take into consideration that these things degrade as fast as a rotten egg. So you will get not that old of vehicles that have been beat on for 2 years, but you can buy them at a used cost, and then that is your level of entry, is just getting a used vehicle, just like you do with the current Cherokee.
Yeah,
The prices
a lot of
that too. Yeah. And,
Go ahead,
and
Richie.
there's financing, which is huge. When financing becomes a legitimate thing, that opens a lot of doors for a lot of people. There's not many people, I mean, there are, but you know what I mean. Not everyone can just walk out and drop $75,000 on something. Whereas if they finance it and get a loan for it and make payments on it, then it becomes far more, attainable for people. So
yeah, but at the same time though, like a lot of people that we've talked to have gone into the sport because their first vehicle was a Jeep or something that they brought into the woods. And so if you're getting it to the point where you have these production vehicles that you're now using for the sport, a lot of people won't be getting into it like they were, because even, you're not going to see a 15, 16-year-old kid getting financing to purchase something, even if it's used.
No,
That can
they do it for
be way above
side-by-sides
the
every
price
day.
point.
Yeah.
yeah, but then, again, it's like I can just bring it right back to the same conversation I was having with the dirt bikes. It's just one of those things that, like, once it becomes a norm, then it is a norm to buy a used vehicle at the lower end price point to do what you want to do.
You got it. There'd be used ones of those 5 years after. Exactly. Yep. It did take a little. It'd be a culture shock up front for sure. So let me ask you this: do you guys still drive your stuff on the road? Is that where you guys are at with like license plates and all that?
Yes.
For the most part.
Yeah, so that
legally-
absolutely wouldn't solve that problem. I agree with you right there 100%. Like, if you are looking for true dual purpose where it's like, this is how I get to school and work and whatever, get my groceries, and it's how I wheel, like, yeah, you're not going to get that out of something like that, probably. Not, I mean, that's what a Jeep is at that point. You know what I mean? You buy a brand new Rubicon, whatever, that's kind of as close as you can get to that. So
Now, I will say, like, my Jeep it's on stickies. I don't drive it like to work and back and whatnot, but I do still like take it over to my buddy's house who's 5 miles down the road. I drive it to the local car shows, or like we'll take it out to go and get dinner. But I like that factor, and like even if I were to in the future consider a buggy chassis, it would get plated as a Razor.
So that is an interesting question that I actually would like to ask you guys, if you don't mind, because I like getting people's input on this. So when you see these like events where guys, like, I'm sure you've seen like years ago, Rick Paway used to do like, the like Ultimate Adventure series where you had to drive stuff on the road and it was part of it. Yep. Is that something that you guys like, that appeals to you, that you think is cool to have to do that, like that adds to the whole mystique? Or like, at some point do you just say, yeah, that's silly, like I did that when I was 15. I don't care about keeping stuff running. Like, I want to trailer it and ride an AC and, whatever. So
I'm indifferent. Sorry, God, Luke. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say Cody is definitely on team trailer and.
No,
and
let me
buggy and
fucking
not
tell
road
it myself
driving.
then. You
Okay, fine.
goof.
Say what I just. Said.
I think that there's two different sides of it that can be really cool. Driving your shit on the road is And doing things like that is really fun. It's a lot of fun to get into a shit box, make really horrific noises when you're pulling to the gas station, and everybody's like, look at this thing. It looks like it's got totaled 10 times. But to me, you're like, or to yourself, you're like, this thing made it down the road 5 minutes. And stuff like that is really fucking cool. But then we have to take in consideration, now you're just asking to get in trouble with the cops if it's not inspected, different things like that. You also add a shit ton of stress to yourself by driving it somewhere to go wheeling than to have to drive it back, because everybody knows, like, you could thrash on something in the woods for 8 hours and it may still be good to go wheeling, but above 40 miles an hour, that thing is sketchy as fuck.
That's the answer I hear most often. Just to not, I want to hear everybody else's take on this too. But what you just said, that idea of guys are like, look, man, at some point when I start doing hard enough stuff, I don't want to drive 8 hours away to some off-road park and then feel like I can only run blue trails because I'm worried that I'm going to break something and I won't be able to make it home. Like, that's the argument for the trailer side of it. So. And
then there's Graham, who's big dick swinging and doesn't give a fuck. Like, Graham, you can explain. We haven't even talked about Badlands, which was an off-roading event that we recently went to, and like, you can explain your side of it, Graham, because I think you have a very happy side of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love being able to drive it on the road. It's not legal at all. There's nothing legal about it. I don't know how I haven't been pulled over in the thing.
For all the members of the Massachusetts law enforcement, no, just
we're friends with one. He's like, "Well, I'd pull you over for this or this," and I'm always probing him about what can I do and what can't I do, and when can they grab me? He'll always give me his input. But I haven't gotten, knock on wood, I haven't had any major crap with it. The thing drives really nice. It's slow as shit because it's a crawler, not a race car. But for me, it's always been, and how I got into it, and this is just me stuck in my ways, and longer trips, like when we go down to Tennessee or West Virginia or the Missouri trip we recently did, like when we do that, yeah, it's going on a trailer. I don't trust us to drive that far. But around where we are, all the parks are pretty small, and it's only like 2-ish hours for the furthest
you can
ones.
call a buddy and have him come out with a trailer or whatever. If you
or I've got AAA. I just
or you gave me your keys, just in case.
I just put the keys in the ignition and turn the battery off, and nobody can take it. And I unhook the neutral safety switch, so you could turn the key. First off, if it's sitting there, you probably don't want to drive it anyways. But
and you run like hard trails in this thing. I'm guessing.
Beat the crap out of the thing. Yeah.
He's rolled it, and he almost got a perfect barrel roll last time we were at Good Evening Ranch.
Yeah, that was a trailer thing. But I mean, for me, the driving the vehicle to the trail just to beat the shit out of it with almost no regard is kind of fun. It's satisfying, right? And not every time does it go swimmingly, right? There's occasionally issues, and you're driving it down the road. But
Roush Creek with the fucking water in the AX-15.
Yeah, I drove 7 hours home with water in my transmission. That was all that was in it. There was no fluid. But like for me, that's like it's still part of the. It's not off-roading, but it's still part of off-roading.
Man, yeah.
Like that's like I
absolutely was that guy when I was like 15, 16. I'll tell you right now. Like
I love the finding your way out of interesting problems like that, because it's
it's a good story.
It's a good story. It's how I've always thought of shit. Now I'm against the mold of what you basically talked about the first 20-30 minutes of the podcast. I'm a computer engineering dropout who got into Jeeps as a side thing, and I'm an IT guy. Like, I'm not an extreme sports person, but I like found this, and this is what I like, and I like solving problems, and what better way to do that than have it be high intensity.
I describe serious rock crawling as a mix between chess and ballroom dancing, and everybody always looks at me like I got three heads.
That makes sense.
What in the hell? And it's like, when you think about it, you got to be thinking multiple moves ahead of what you're going to do. You know what I mean? And then if something gets like changes between point A and point B, that's the chess factor of it, right? And then ballroom dancing, you got to have that feel. Like if you have that, you know what I'm talking about that feeling of the balance of, yeah, it's right there. It's going to go. I need to turn into this rocky. You can feel the tire bite a little bit. It's going to climb that. It's going. It wants it. You know what I mean? It's, yeah, it's something that appeals to that side of it, more intellectual people. So I get both sides of that too, for sure.
You know, and his rig is fairly well behaved going down the road too. Like I've ridden in it, and when he was down here, that thing, it's been very well engineered for what it is, and it really hurts me to give him compliments like that.
It's not a perfect rig by any means, but it's never, it doesn't really deny me on this. Like obviously I'm not doing full XRock tube chassis single seater trails in the thing. There's limitations, obviously. There's always going to be limitations on this specific rig. And I don't mind it that way. There's still plenty of hard shit that I jam it through, and it makes it that much more satisfying when you can put something that still has it's resembling what it was originally. I mean, I've got so much tube in the thing at this point. It's almost it's crossing the line. It will be crossing the line very shortly of where it's just a skin and it's all fabricated underneath.
Yeah, most people, when they get to that point, that's exactly like going full circle on this conversation. That's where guys are like, man, I'm frustrated. I should have just started from scratch. You know what I mean? We'll see if you get to that point or not. Not everybody does. Some people are like super content where they're at, but that's usually where guys have this epiphany and they're like, the hell am I doing? You know, but it also, like, you probably got there in a number of steps, you know what I mean? Which, like, if you jumped straight into a tube rig, probably never would have got done. You would have been like dejected halfway into it and be like, the project never got finished.
Exactly.
Whereas if you start with something like a Jeep like that, you can make baby steps of modifications and you go, oh, that's cool. I added this like locker and look how much better it works. You know, stuff like that is that's lost on the whole full tube chassis way of
and I think you gain the knowledge of what each part does, right? By doing it incrementally, and you don't have to sit.
Yeah, learning that is important.
I mean,
you need to learn to write stuff with open diffs. If you never figure that out, then you need to start with stuff like that for sure.
Yep. And
I don't know. Like, I want to agree, but when I take a step back and I look at it like dirt bikes, which it kind of would end up being like it's tough for me to say because like I started out on an 85 when I was 11. Like, yes, I had the parental push to do it, but if I was 16 and hopped on a 250 just like I would hop in an XJ, I feel like you would learn the same way though because you don't have to.
This harkens back directly to the type of people conversation. So
that's
like,
a good point. Yeah,
X Games type of extreme sport athlete, you have that like seat of the pants feel of stuff that you're going to figure out when you're like, I can feel the tire biting or I can feel whatever. If you're not that guy, there's nothing wrong either way. Like, I think learning from ground zero is far more valuable for those people. You know what I mean?
Okay, I can respect that. That's a really good mindset. I like that.
I mean, I'm coming at it from the opposite end of the spectrum, and I appreciate and I really like the hardcore shit. But what got me into it was the building of the thing, was the engineering.
I ran the servers for a small technologies firm for 2 years too.
Nice. Okay, yeah. So same.
I had a little bit of that sort of side of things going on too, so I get it. I totally get where you're coming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a nut job for learning how that shit works. Like I get off to that. Like, I love learning about how everything works. Right. It makes me
engineering
nervous.
And physics side of things.
Yeah, right? It makes me nervous when I've got a black box in front of me. So if you were to just plop me in a chassis that I bought at a store with lock and have like pull way back, right? You know how cars work and they drive on the road and they drive like a car. And then you were to put a chassis in front of me, built, ready to go, and say, go climb rocks. I'd be like, what? I mean, there'd be a disconnect, right? I wouldn't understand.
Yeah, there's a huge disconnect, quantum leap there between those 2 points. Yeah. Yep, I get it.
But I didn't start doing the rock crawling. Wasn't what I started as. Nobody starts in off-roading. That's never where you start usually.
That's where I started. Like I said, it didn't exist. Like, not on the East Coast, and for like, there were 15 guys doing it out west casually.
Yep. So. And what happened was you meet some guys who do it, and you're like, oh shit. At least now that it's a thing, right? I started back in like 2015, so not super long ago, only probably 8 years.
Yeah. That's substantial in today's measures of things. A lot happened in the last 8 years, for sure.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead. I've got some stuff I want to add in.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, you meet these people who have something that's doing crazy things that you didn't even think were possible. So obviously, you make that person your friend, those people your friends, because that's cool and you want to do that. And then you build your shit to do the same thing, and then it's just a vicious cycle, at least in my experience. And like I said, I've never been an extreme sports guy. I was never a skater guy. I didn't do BMX. I skied. I slammed into plenty of trees. Like I guess that kind of counts, but that was never my mindset.
Yeah. But I came in from the other end, whereas like I didn't know anybody like in this sport. I just said, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I started fabricating and building stuff and engineering things. And I don't know, there's a side of me that enjoys that sort of thing. So, and I tend to be half decent at it, I guess. So, yeah, I didn't like hang out with anybody. And I just said, oh, okay, this is a thing. I'm going to figure out how to do this. And I started doing that. And then I started running unlimited class and competing in professional rock crawling competitions because why not? Those guys can do it. I can do it. Right?
Yep.
So, like going back a little bit with what we were talking about earlier, right? I like just having my rig go down the road and everything because it's like a really nice summit, if you will, to this rig. Pinnacle, yeah. It's the pinnacle
Fancy
to
word.
Yeah, this rig. And this rig should have been a tube chassis. It did not fit my life at that point in time. I had some of the skill set, but not the full skill set to actually do it at the time that I started on my current two-door Cherokee. And then, like, now it served for a very long time on 1-tons and 40s as my backup daily driver. Sometimes it was my daily driver for like 3 months when I bought my F-250, and I had front end problems with it. So being able to drive it on the street, to me, it's awesome. And the best part about driving my rig down the road for me is that it rides better than my truck does. It's louder, it's obnoxious, but like, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I know guys who would say it's therapeutic to just get out there and do that with something like that. I never really had that whole thing, like, feel-wise. I mean, I had, like, race cars, and I autocrossed and, did go fast stuff with cars and whatnot, too. But I don't know. I just never got that whole, like, therapy thing of driving on the street. Like, that never... Not saying there's anything wrong with your way of looking at it, but I talk to guys all the time that say, yeah, I get out in that thing, and it's just, like, it's decompression. Like, I love it.
It just puts a stupid smile on my face, because it's like, here I am driving this 5,000-plus pound shitbox Cherokee that, like Cody said, looks like it's been totaled multiple times. But now that I've gotten, some of the abuse from the last couple wheeling trips, I'm on stickies that are at like fucking 6 PSI, and the thing goes down the road at 55 miles an hour with 2 fingers on the steering wheel again. That's fucking awesome to me.
That's an accomplishment for sure. If you wheel it, I mean, I assume hydro assist. That helps.
Hydro assist. Yep.
Yeah. Your ball joints can be like completely falling off, and you won't know.
Oh, they are absolutely fucked.
Sounds like a caddy.
But to further the point, if I were to have had the option of tube chassis when I went to get into this, I wouldn't have done it. Not because just because of the initial investment, right? Like, I got into this because my dad was into diesel truck racing, and that was a fucking expensive hobby if you're 16.
It's a big jump if you don't know somebody who did this, like rock crawling. Like I said, your uncle or your dad or your neighbor or somebody you were close with. It is a big jump to just be like, I don't know anything about this. It looks kind of cool, but I'm going to spend X amount of dollars to jump in with both feet into some professional caliber rock crawling stuff. I get that completely. It's a lot easier to get a Jeep and be like, I can sell this and somebody will want it. If I don't like it, I can play around with it and do stuff slowly and test the waters and, do it. It's multi-purpose. I get all of that, man. That is very true.
And the final point I'm going to add is now with where I am at, if I ever go to do a tube chassis, it is going to be a tube chassis built to the 4800 class specs, and it is also going to still have turn signals and standard headlights, so it'll get plated as a Razor where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And I will still be street driving it, even if it is completely scratch built tube chassis.
Yeah, I mean, if you know where you're at and that's where you're at, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, not everybody has to decide they want to go extreme in one direction and do. I mean, I can respect all sides of pieces and parts from coming at this from all angles. So that's cool, man.
Yeah, and the thing that I really have to say I like about XRock is not for me. I am not the target demographic, but I love watching the extreme end of the sport. Like watching people like Ricky Barrett, and I forget some of the other names, but like when I saw the event come up from Good Evening Ranch, because like I really like Good Evening Ranch as a park. Now, thanks to the event that we've got going on, I know the managers on a first name basis.
Great people. Yeah, great people down there, man. Yeah.
When I saw that event come up, I just had to go through and watch all the clips. It's not exactly what I want to do, but it is extreme and it is very in your face and it puts eyeballs on stuff, which is awesome.
Yep, that's what we're going for, man. I think the biggest comment I get from anybody that watches what we do is something along the lines of, if you had told me that a car was going to drive over this or through this or whatever, I would have told you were full of shit. There is no way. And then I watched it happen and I still can't believe it. Like if you don't have a point of reference for that stuff, people are just blown away because you wouldn't. I mean, it's so far removed from even, like I said, even from like We Rock. I mean, it's a level of stuff that most people can't fathom or comprehend if they haven't been around it. You get used to it. It's just like anything else extreme. But yeah, it's something. I hear that a lot.
It's something has got to be one of the weirdest phrases ever because it can be a compliment and it can be disbelief. It's something.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into what have you had for vehicles? This has been the most podcast of all of our podcasts I will say we have ever had, which has been quite fun where we just talk about a topic and go off on it. It was awesome. But let's talk a little bit more about you.
I didn't know if you were just going to talk or it's better this way if you ask me. I mean,
100%.
Did I just robot? Sorry, I just saw that I had a. Okay, cool. All right, so let's dive into a little bit. Let's tell us about your rigs and your fab shop and all that. Kind of dive in.
Sure. All right, so I started in this, like I said, when I got kicked out of high school and went to reform school, and I wanted a big dumb mud truck because that's what everybody had. So I got myself like an old first gen Dodge with a 318 gas motor in it, half-ton Dodge that had 35s on it, mud tires, bunch of lift and whatnot. And I flogged that thing through the mud and broke stuff and learned how to fix things and did that. And that was cool. With all my buddies from, reform school and whatnot, did that thing for a while. And then, as I said, as soon as I saw this whole, hey, you can drive on rocks, that was it. And of course, we didn't have rock crawlers. What I knew was like these big square body Chevys and full size mud trucks. So we were trying to do rock crawling in those things. And I mean, honestly, it kind of works. They're not the vehicle for it, but it'll teach you how to drive. I can tell you that. If you can put a full-size truck through a rock crawling course, like you're a hell of a driver. So we did a bunch of that. And then, I don't know, from there, I kind of said, I never liked Jeeps. Jeeps just weren't really my thing. Like we'd go out with guys that had Jeeps and stuff, and they were always just kind of, I don't know. They were kinda, I don't even know how to describe it, but they just didn't feel like robust. I don't know. They didn't have that 8-cylinder like growl, and when you're a young kid and into, it was like these things are just kind of wimpy. So
they're kind of tinker toys.
Yeah. So, and they'd always get stuck and you'd have to pull them out when it comes to like driving through mud and stuff. And it was always the running joke, like the guys at the Jeeps just couldn't do the stuff that these big like monster trucks could do. So, but yeah, when we started transforming from there and transitioning over into like the rock crawling stuff, I don't know. It was just pretty apparent to me, like I said, that like I want to build stuff that's like tubular or at very least like completely designed to go off-road. So the first thing that I built was a 78 Suburban chassis that somebody gave to me. That when I had my shop, I started working on cars for dealerships and whatnot. And I bounced around working at a couple dealerships, and then I started my own shop and was doing regular mechanics work. And then I said, I should really just try and do an off-road shop. And that's where I started doing off-road only work and whatnot. And from there, you build what you know. It's like, all right, I don't know anything about tube chassis. I mean, tube chassis weren't really a thing at that point. You got to realize, like, you're going back into the era where, like, Steve Rumor of Avalanche Engineering, you know what I mean? He made the Sniper. You had a couple guys who were putting things together, like Sonny Honegger built the Scorpion MK2 for Heath Biggs. There were a couple things like that. Eventually, Tiny got built, and John Nelson put that thing together, and John Bundren ran it, and that was like a game changer. But I mean, that's even past where we're talking about. When I started doing this, it was, for some reason, it's the silly things, right? That like you wonder, like guys had been having full tube chassis and like NASCARs and like rail dragsters and funny cars and stuff like that for years. This was nothing new, but for some reason, like, tunnel vision, closed mindedness in our sport, like guys were like, no, what you need to do is start with like a 70 something shoebox Bronco or like a Jeep CJ. Like that's the right platform for this. And nobody was doing anything with tubes. It was one of those things where it kind of like, you look at it and you're like, why did it take us so long to go full tube? But anyway, during that era, that's when I built this 78 Suburban. I always loved to like go big on stuff, big verticals. So the thing was like 120 some inch wheelbase, big tires and 1-ton parts, 8-cylinder TH400 Atlas. When Atlases first came out, it was right after they did the peanut case and all that stuff, the prototypes. I don't know if you guys know about any of that stuff, but yeah, man, Pat Gramillion had the first, I think, peanut case in his welder wagon, the guy that owns Premier Power Welder. But so, yeah, like that era of stuff, we cobbled things together. And that's where it started on the East Coast. And from there, I guess it quickly morphed into tube chassis stuff. And yeah, that's the direction we went. And now I got a whole bunch of stuff. I got an old Bronco 2 Truggy that's sitting with a broken axle shaft that's been sitting for, I think, at least 3 years now, and I refuse to put an axle shaft in. I mean, I'm just so, like, I couldn't do anything with it. You know what I mean? I could go wreck wheel it, but I always got a seat with somebody else if I need it. So it's not like I'm wanting for a way to go wreck wheel. And if I built another comp car, I really don't have anything I could run it in. I mean, there's nobody other than like Little Rich with Trail Hero, which he does, Trailbreaker once a year. There's really nothing I'm interested in running or that I'd be able to run. I can't run my own stuff. That's a huge conflict of interest, obviously. So I've got a piece of a Pro Mod chassis sitting, on my chassis table in my shop right now. And I've got the base of a Moon Car chassis sitting there and countless pieces and parts, transmissions, engines, transfer cases, you name it. But yeah, I'm like, I've got a pile of it, I won't say expensive, but more expensive than I guess a lot of people's stuff. Garbage sitting in the corner of my shop collecting dust. That's what I wheel. I wheel this this mouse in front of me that I'm using on the computer to talk to you guys right now. And I get in with my buddies, and I'll do things like that. I'll go out and spot for people. I do a lot of that sort of thing. We cut a lot of trails, do a lot of like property development for various off-road parks and things like that. We're out. So I'm out a lot, and we still wheel locally and whatnot. It's just I haven't driven in quite some time.
Damn, well that's holy shit. So all right, what's your plan with the moon buggy and Pro Mod? Are you planning on making some abortion of a rig, or
well, they're two separate rigs. So Pro Mod, when the sport started, I don't know how much you guys know about the history of the origins of the sport of competitive rock crawling, but when it started, there were three classes: Mod Stock, Pro Mod, and Unlimited. So Mod Stock is basically your Jeeps. It's something that has to be to start life as a factory, production vehicle with a minimum run of 500 or more in a model year. And it has to be something that still resembles that. It has to retain all body panels. You can't like cut holes in the floorboard for load bearing shocks. There's 1,000,001 rules. You can't alter the wheelbase more than 3 inches from stock in any direction. That's Mod Stock. That's the most restrictive class. In my opinion, that class is awesome, and it's something that like I would love to see. We actually ran Mod Stock in XRock. Like we had a class, 4 guys doing that. We had quite a few guys out doing it for a couple of years. But the problem is those vehicles are based on factory stuff, and a lot of them are getting older now. So like when you're putting those cars through hard stuff and the bodies are getting destroyed, you can't expect somebody to have to go find another tub every year and cut all their cage work off and put the new tub on there and then go back. I mean, it's not sustainable. So that class, I think we need to move in the direction, if we're going to do something like that, of pin-on body panels, something that's the dimensions of a stock vehicle. But at that point, I mean, you're getting eerily close to what a Pro Mod is. So anyway, that brings me up to what we were talking about with the Pro Mod. The Pro Mod is the middle class. That's 2 seats side by side, front engine, 40-inch tire. Used to be a 37-inch tire. No rear steer, all that sort of thing. Basically what most people think of as your old school, or what you'd call like a Legends class rock crawler, in the early days of stuff. And that class is completely defunct at this point on the East Coast. I haven't had a Mod Stock compete, or I mean a Pro Mod rather, compete in many years. So I have one of those chassis sitting there, and I don't know that it's ever going to do anything. It's just going to sit there. But and then Unlimited, that's your moon cars, like you talk about rear steer and whatever. And now XRock, another thing they've done is added a bunch of classes. So they're blurring the lines between like, pro and amateur, and they've got like trail buggy and rear steer trail buggy, and now they've got like AA sportsman classes and stuff. So which I honestly think that's kind of a disservice. I think it dilutes the field and dilutes the class. I think we need fewer classes. So that's what I did with XRock. I went to a singular class. We run Unlimited, which is the highest caliber of cars, and that's it. You show up, you run what you bring. I mean, you can't be a helicopter and fly over the rocks, but as long as it meets the basic standards for safety tech and is a functional 4-wheel powered vehicle to drive over rocks, that's pretty much anything goes past that. So yeah, the moon car chassis that I have in there, I started years ago, and it's set up for a V8 motor, and I wouldn't want to do that these days, so I'd have to cut the motor mounts out of it. And it was set up for a V8 and a Turbo 400, and I wouldn't run that these days. So I'd use something like an Ecotech or a Honda motor, and doing that, I may eventually get around to building that one, but I have a kid, and he's about to turn 8 years old, and I'd like to get him out in the car. So then I play the game of, man, I should do the Pro Mod. But the Pro Mod, 2 seats side by side, is, I don't know, it's just not functional for what I want to do with it. So Then you go into the whole idea of, man, I could do a fighter jet style, like 2 seats in a row, which those rigs look completely ridiculous, but they give you the benefit of like the skinniness of a moon car.
That's pretty wild.
I don't know. I throw a lot of stuff around, and then basically I realize that I've got my hands full with everything I'm doing, more than enough like of my own time and money expended on this, and I should just stick to working on the sport and having other guys build vehicles and run them. Because if I'm not here, where are they going to go use them? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Somebody has to do this, and I think it might as well be the guy who has a pretty good handle on this sort of thing and enjoys it. And I do, for all my bitching, which, you know, I'm the crotchety, get off my lawn old guy and love to bitch about everything. I 100% do enjoy doing this, and it is, you know, I love the sport. I'm absolutely passionate about it. So, yeah, that's I think where I'm going to be at for the foreseeable future, as long as we have a sport to promote and do this with. I mean, like I said about the insurance stuff and people saying they're not showing up because they don't like X, Y, or Z and not being team players. Like, we have to work together. Like, I go back to like, it's a symbiotic relationship between the sanctioning body and the competitors. I need competitors. I can do events without spectators, right? Not that you want to do events with no spectators, but like I can do events without spectators. I can't do events without competitors, right? And competitors can't have events without a sanctioning body. So that much I need to at least be able to work together. But that's where we come back full circle into this whole entrenched, you know, headbutting and internal politics and hoopla that causes that to be stressful. What I moved into is, you know, I guess what I need to do is what I'm doing now, more than any of this nonsense, more than any of this hoopla of trying to build vehicles, because I got nothing I can compete with them in, man. I can't, you know, I can't compete in my own stuff. I can't, you know, there's really nothing out there for me to go run. And that's the type of thing that I want to do, other than what Little's doing with you know, Trailbreaker, and that's a once a year event. So yeah, I mean, I think I need to try to just keep doing more than building vehicles and more than wheeling them. I still get out. We do a lot of stuff like locally with, you know, my buddies, and I'll spot for them, and we'll go out and rec wheel, and that's always a great way to blow off steam. But rather than concern myself with trying to build vehicles, I got to be the guy, you know, keeping our sport moving forward. And the way to do that, like I said, we've got a great group of sponsors. I got to shout out my sponsors here. Hopefully you guys don't mind, but we got Behemoth Drivetrain, Jim Wynn, who has been phenomenal in his work with the acquisition of Behemoth from Jacob. And yeah, he's putting out some really high-end quality products. Everybody should check out what the new Behemoth has got going on, because you won't be disappointed. Brannick Motorsports, Stan and Brandon Haynes, best axle shafts on the planet right now. Awesome guys. Yeah, they'll take care of you for anything you need custom axle wise, and boy, do they take a beating. You look at all these guys in our series that run their stuff, and they hold up great. Mother's Recovery. Mother's Recovery is Cord Reside out of New Jersey. He's got a family towing service. He's starting up. He's a guy you guys should talk to as far as a podcast. He's starting up an off-road recovery branch of their family towing business, kind of like what you know, these guys out west do, like Rory Irish with Towmater and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
we talked to David Hellman. He was super cool.
Yep. Well, that's Cord. He's the East Coast version of that sort of thing. He is one of our sponsors, phenomenal guy. He's on site doing recovery at all of our events. If you guys are out for the Field and Forest event, you'll get to meet him. Jim Markham from JM Rigging Supply. He does winch lines and spotter straps and all sorts of rigging stuff. Great guy with years of experience in the industry. He'll be out at Field and Forest, I'm pretty sure, as well. Jesse Haynes Fabrication, right? Got to thank Jesse, of course. One of the few guys who's been around doing this as long as I have. He was around back in the late 90s, early 2000s when we were doing this sort of thing. And he's been innovating ever since. All his stuff is top notch and has changed the sport considerably over the years. Summit Machine, Julian Judd. She does 70-75 aluminum links, amongst other things like her own proprietary line of joints and whatnot. All good quality stuff. Great woman to work with. Super supportive. Raceline Wheels has come on, and they've been helping us with a bunch of stuff, which is great. And your guys, local boy Eric Amato, who I guess you guys have had on. Awesome.
Eric is great
Radio
shit.
Dynamics, best steering stuff out there. Quality equipment for sure. His new trophy truck pump is beast. If you guys have seen that thing, so. But yeah, those guys have helped us do what we need to do. I also want to shout out Randy Cruz from Texas Top Gun Shootout, because he's the first guy who came up with this idea of paying out $10,000, right? And that's important. If you look at like Ultra 4 payout, they had a race up here at Reading Off-Road last weekend, and they only pay out $15,000 for first, $3,000 for second, $1,000 for third, and their entry fees are significantly higher, right? And that's Ultra 4 racing, which is by all accounts, more funded than what we got going on. So the way our sponsors have stepped up for this year is absolutely phenomenal, man. We're paying out close to $30,000 across two events, $10,000 for first, and as well as payouts for second and third place, which is nothing to sneeze at. But the man who started that was Randy Cruz with the Texas Top Gun Shootout out there at K2, Katemsi Rocks. He was the one that said, yeah, we need to put money in this. And when I heard that he did that, I said, yeah, I'm keeping that ball rolling. That's what we're doing this year. I don't care if we can only do one or two events. I'm not doing an event if we can't pay out $10,000. And all these sponsors that I just mentioned were the ones that were crazy enough to side with me and say, yeah, Hans, that's a great idea. Where do we sign? So thanks to all of those guys. And thanks to Randy for being the first one to stick his neck out and do that. And I think we're headed in the right direction. We just have to get past some of this hoopla with the internal politics, and like I said, attract some of these guys. Like these, we were talking about these 12-year-old kids doing backflips on dirt bikes. We need to create a product that guy wants to join. That he wants to build a race car and say, I want to compete in XRock. That's cool. I want to do that. So that's I think that's the biggest thing I got to be concerned with, because if we don't have that, then we won't have a sport. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We got to get new guys. We got to bring in new blood. We got to grow the sport. We got to evolve, and somebody has to do it. And that person kind of has to have a pretty good idea of what's going on in all angles of this and the history of it, or you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot. So
with that, what do you think the Rec Wheelers can do to bring more people in and get them up to the next level? Because
I think showing up for events is the single biggest thing. Honestly, guys that can't show up, just join in our forum. Like XRock has a forum, and there's, 600 people on there or something like that right now. I can assure you all 600 of those guys do not rock crawl in XRock competitively. They're there to glean information from these guys, to be able to ask questions and see what's going on and talk about their builds and stuff like that. So that's huge. Being able to interact and get involved. That's one.
Is it kind of like the old pirate vibe?
Yeah, I guess it's I'm unabashedly going to say what I'm going to say. If you guys have figured out anything by this conversation, it's probably I'm not afraid to say what I want to say, and it doesn't matter who's pissed off by it. So there's that. That piece of it is kind of pirate-esque, but it's funny. I haven't been on Pirate in years, since it was sold to like the Canadians or whatever. I don't know.
Ruin that fucking website.
I don't know what my Pirate number is. I'd have to go. I wonder if I still have my password. I haven't logged in. Anyway, I'm sure it's like, I was on Pirate again, late 90s, or as soon as it started. So, but yeah, not the same as it used to be. I guess it still exists, but I haven't been on it in years.
It's not the same, and not enough people get told to go fuck themselves for asking what size bolt a Super Duty 60 uses.
Yeah, I mean, Lance did really well with that, and I'm super happy for him. And, that was a huge service to get. And that's like history stuff that most people, unless you go back and and understand that and were there for that sort of thing, it doesn't really carry the weight. So
also Bill Vista,
mm-hmm.
if I remember correctly, with his mega threads that were just absolute autism about what Dana 60 parts are compatible.
Yeah, so Bill's he's a Canadian guy. That was Right Coast Crawlers was his group. That came considerably later. That was, he was towards the tail end of the pirate era. But yeah, he absolutely did a lot. Like his Dana 60 Bible and stuff, if you need like to know what race number or whatever seal part number is for this, that's absolutely useful. There's a bunch of useful tech in there that he still keeps up that guys access from time to time, I'm sure. So, but
also he did the 4-link calculator, which is a contentious subject these days, but I found it to be super fucking helpful.
Yeah, I've never used a 4-link calculator. If you learn, there's a bunch of Herb Adams chassis engineering and things like that. You can read a bunch of race car mechanics books and it'll explain the concepts of basic roll access center and anti-squat and things like that, and link separation and all those sorts of things for torsional.
It's a little known fact, but I can't read. I just put numbers in and see numbers move and it makes me happy.
That generation, right? I hear you, buddy. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I know you can't spell because half the podcast descriptions, but that's besides the point. I didn't realize you couldn't read either. Makes sense. Now you can't proofread.
Jeez, man. Leave the guy alone. But no, I think I do agree with you. I know that one of my grandfather's friends, bless his soul, he just recently passed away, but he was mentioning to me I believe it's called the 4-Link Bible or something like that. It's an old school drag racing book that just explains how to help your car and adjust your car when it's doing certain things and how to build out the 4-link based off of XYZ. And he was mentioning it to me, and that's something that I'm probably going to pick up at some point too.
That sort of stuff. I'm not familiar with that exact book you're mentioning, but there's quite a bit of information out there, on that subject if you want to dive into it. The basics of understanding, what it is you're trying to accomplish. Again, we go back to the Ultra 4 cars. The Go Fast guys were here at Reading, and I do a lot of work there. We've cut in our comp course there, and I'm on the 4th or 5th phase of expansion over the years. We started cutting there before it was ever an off-road park. And we do a lot of other stuff in the area, AOAA and, Roush Creek and stuff we have. But anyway, those guys were running through there, and you look at those cars, and I was on their forum, Rock Sports Insiders, busting Casey Gilbert's balls about, because he posted up these videos, and, it was all for fun, but he posted up these videos of these guys on this trail that we take, Jeeps on 35s up, and he was on the bypass, right? And he was posting how extreme this was, and him and Josh and Rusty were trying to hammer through there, and they were hung on the diff, and I was like, dude, gotta love Ultra 4 cars. They can't even make it up the bypass, let alone the regular trail. And it's as much as I'm joking, the reason those cars work as poorly as they do in rocks is because they're set up to absorb impacts at speed. And you can't have it both ways. If you're setting up a vehicle to be able to hit rocks at 50 miles an hour and suck that up and absorb it, you're not going to create contact pressure at 2 miles an hour on rocks, So it's so much of it is understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish with the engineering of what it is you're trying to do. Nowadays, the thing that's changed, all of this back in the day, there was no any of this pre-made stuff. The biggest difference is now you have 4-link kit from Dan DeBose of Motobuilt to bolt on and do this, or Barnes 4-wheel drive. Here's the truss for this, and it positions your links here to put there's guys who just do stuff like this without knowing. And I'm not ragging on them, you know what I mean? But they don't know. You don't have to know to end up with something that works. It'll certainly go down the trail and sort of function. But back in the day, you had to build all that stuff and engineer all of it from scratch. And, obviously the guys who know what they're doing, the real proper fabricators, that's what they're doing when they're engineering stuff like that. And that's kind of a lost art. There's not as many people doing that sort of thing nowadays. It's more bolt and blast, which
the thing I will say though, I am 120% on board with that stuff coming out, because if you can understand some of the principles behind it and like you've been in it for a while, it makes it so much easier to build something wild.
Yeah, I mean, it allows you, like, you got to understand the engineering. One way or the other, you have to know why, like, things behave the way they do if you change the distance between this attachment point and this attachment point. You know what I mean? What is that doing? And things like that. Those sorts of things. There's a lot of stuff, man. Like, there's a lot of stuff for, like, theoretical center of mass for, like, making a vehicle work is not anywhere near as simple as most people probably think it is. But that said, you can absolutely cobble something together and make something sort of work within reason that's still probably better than most of everybody else's stuff. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, with that. But and you always have to cheat anyway. Like, if you build a vehicle, the ultimate, even if you start from scratch with tubes and you build the whole thing, the right way to do that is to engineer the whole thing on one piece of paper. And, you know, what most people do is they'll, like, all right, the motor's going to go here. Well, now X is in the way of Y, so we got to figure out a way to make this work. We're going to move this, and we're going to move that. That's not, like, they do it in stages. Oh, no, this doesn't fit now, so we're going to, and I understand that's like the limit of most people's engineering, the average guy. What you want to do is engineer the entire vehicle from scratch. Like, if you have like a Formula One car, you look at what those guys do. They engineer the whole car in one swoop. And I mean, they spend a lot of money doing this, but like, that's the right way to do it. Getting to that point requires an incredible understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then, even then, you got to cheat. Even if you start from dead scratch, you know, nothing, you're going to wind up in a situation where you're like, man, if I want 50 degrees of steering, this link is going to have to go, you know, an inch over this way. And that's not where I want that, because that's going to impact X, Y, and Z. But, like, I want 50 degrees of steering more. And I don't want the car to be 6 inches wider. So that's what we deal with. And that's the game you play when you get into the heavy duty levels of what we do. And that stuff is notable. Like, I don't know if you, again, your conversation earlier about what can the average rec wheeler do, come out. I have a whole bunch of buddies of mine, right? People that are now friends with me or whatever, that they met like me by coming out and seeing this stuff. And they're like, I get it now. I see what these cars work, and I can see that one works differently than this one. Hans, explain to me what is different about car A from car B. And when you start seeing that stuff and you go over it and I give you a rundown or whatever, guys will be like, oh, I get it now. Like, I want to work to create this. And you're always playing the game of what you want to maximize and minimize, where you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's the balance of it. You know what I mean? That's the part of it. That's the artistic, like, I don't know, the part that I guess appeals to, you know, like you were saying, you're you know, computer savvy and you like that type. That's the beauty in something like that. When you see the way somebody packaged something and you're like, yeah, I know why he did that. I see what he did there. And he wasn't happy about this, but he did it this way. And, you know, most people don't look at cars like that, I guess. They look at it and go, wow, those TIG welds are sexy. Like, that's rainbow, you know. But, yeah, I don't know. Again, it's a different way of looking at things, I guess. And a lot of that is lost. And I'd love to get back to that. I would. I'd love to, like, help guys but at the same time, like, it's not for everybody. And I don't want people to hear this and think that, like, I don't respect you if you don't know all this. It's not like that. Not everybody needs to know that. That's why we have chassis guys. But it's like, if me and Jesse Haynes or, you know, whoever are going to be having a conversation about stuff like this, it's going to be drastically different than me and, you know, your average guy who does rec wheeling. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's where I don't know. You need all sides of it. You need somebody. You can't. If nobody's going to buy that stuff, you're kind of not in business. If everybody knows all that stuff and does it themselves, I guess. So.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And there's like levels to it too, right? Like I'm not really most likely ever going to compete, so that's not something that I need to know at that level. I do like certain aspects of competition vehicles, so I research how those affect everything. And I did rob Peter to pay Paul on my rear forelink. I should have definitely had more rear upper separation at the axle, width-wise, not like height-wise. Height-wise, fine, but
triangulation, right? You're not running a track bar, yeah.
Yeah, it's over triangulated on the upper links, and that created some interesting stuff that I was able to tune around, but I didn't expect it to be at the level it was for the first.
Limit straps do a lot, but I'm assuming you're experiencing a lot of rear steer during.
No,
okay,
just body roll.
Okay,
but I ended up cranking the adjusters down, so now it's hitting the dual rate about 1/4 of an inch off, and it's kind of not exactly the perfect solution.
Anti-rocks do a lot. Not telling you to go put one on there, but you can if you run. How much up travel are you running?
I'm running 5 inches.
Yeah, that doesn't help with your body roll either. I mean, so yours again, if you were running it as a dedicated crawler that had an inch or two of up travel to a hard bump or something, you run air bumps and all that?
No.
Okay, yeah. If you were running it with less up travel, you know what I mean? Then you could suck. I mean, you can cheat with suck down winches. You can do a lot of things with a lot of things, but having 5 inches of up travel is not going to help your body roll situation off camber with something like that. I agree.
No,
but you need it so you're not bleeding out of the kidneys when you're driving down a trail at speed.
Yes, and my rig does very well. I know Cody's laughing because he was in it at Roush when I was really getting on it, but
kidneys were in fact bleeding. Yep.
I think overall, given what it is exceptionally well behaved at speed, especially off road.
It's better than mine.
And I'm not afraid of sending that thing off of weird off camber jumps and whatnot. At this point, I've started getting very comfortable with that to a point it's actually becoming a problem.
Right.
So I robbed Peter to pay Paul, but I'm happy with the results overall. I almost said risotto.
I was going to say you're risotto.
You're a poet and you didn't even know it. Peter to pay Paul, and you're happy with the results overall. Making a rap.
There you go. Poet and you don't even know it.
And one other thing that I will say that's been super cool for outsider looking in at XRocks is, especially after talking with someone like Ricky, I like seeing some of the different car designs that are coming out of there. Project Lemon Drop is definitely different.
It's cool. Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? I'm sure he catches all kinds of hell for that, right? But I mean, realistically speaking, the Dana 30 is not a exceptionally bad axle. I mean, when treated and looked upon as what it is meant for, the Dana 35 is a piece of garbage. The Dana 30 is actually not a terrible piece of equipment. They hold up a lot better than you would think, especially with the big JK outers that he now put on it and stuff. I still think it's a little, sooner or later, he did that just to do it, obviously. And I'm sure if you talk to Ricky, it wasn't you know what I mean? Okay. He's got nothing to prove. It was just kind of well, this is what I wanted to do, so I did it. I know he's building a new rig with big boy 10.5 Toyota parts, which is going in the polar opposite direction. But yeah, Lemon Drop is cool for sure. He's got a lot of neat stuff in there. He's got the setup from the lull. If you guys have ever used a telehandler, forklift that has the selector switch to allow you to go the different modes for your front and rear steer. So you can have it crab, or you could have it opposite lock, or you can have independent. He's actually running one of those. He's done a bunch of neat stuff with that thing. Yeah, Ricky's an interesting guy.
And so this is going out to Bob. What was your takeaway from running an XRock's event at Field and Forest?
Well, Bob is an interesting guy as well, since we're talking about interesting guys. Bob and I get along really well, and I think it's because we're a lot more alike than maybe he would want to admit, or I would want to admit. I don't know. Either one of us would want to admit. But no, I mean, Bob's a guy. He takes no shit, man. I met Bob from. I was doing a put up or shut up event at Chaos, which is another park where we went down in West Virginia and near the Cove. If you guys know where like Big Dogs does their events there in Gore.
Yep.
Next mountain over, there's an off-road park there owned by a guy named John Rubenstein. And we've been working with him, and we cut in the comp area up top of there. A.K. Watley took us over there a couple of years ago, and he was like, I want to see if there's anything in here that you guys would be able to use. Well, it turns out there was. But anyway, I made a post on Facebook with some photos. And, of course, Bob and Liza are like, I said, you know, this is the hardest stuff on the East Coast. This is what we're running on. And, you know, Bob, of course, that got Bob's ears perked right up. And he's like, hardest stuff, eh? You know, and I was like, well, Bob, you know, and it was kind of like he hadn't met me. And, you know, I'm sure he knew me by way of like other people. But he was like, well, how can you say that if you don't know, you haven't been to my place? And I said, well, I've been a lot of places, Bob. And, you know, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but, you know, I have a pretty good handle on what, I mean, this is pretty gnarly stuff and blah, 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 blah. But I said, I would love to come see your spot. So fast forward, I went up there and, you know, he was walking me around and he's like, well, what are you looking for? He showed me a bunch of stuff. We walked around the property. I assume you guys frequent Field and Forest yourselves being up there in that area, right?
That would be the Grumbino's area of expertise. I moved to Tennessee right when the rig was right about ready to go there.
Okay. Well, so it is a cool park, absolutely. And so Bob's walking me around, and there's like, he had me on, you know, showed me a bunch of stuff. Like Bunghole and Taint has a bunch of stuff we could use, but you'd have to cut a ton of stuff. And I know he didn't want to do that, and honestly, I didn't want to do that. It's a lot of work. We don't need it. And then, you know, we walked around all kinds of other stuff he had there. There's some stuff on Sucker Punch in the back that could be useful, but it's hard on the property line, and it's hard to get spectators in and out of there. And then he showed me Dick in the Dirt, because I was like, you have anything bigger? Like, you have like big rock? Like, they had a lot of stuff, but a lot of it is not necessarily massive, like monolithic rocks the size of a vehicle or a house. Like, you know what I mean? And some of it is. But anyway, I was like, do you have a concentration of that? He took me over there, and I was like, this is where we need to do this. This is where we need to do this. So, you know, Eugene Whitford and the guys up there that, I guess, Rhode Island Trail Slayers and those fellas did a bunch of work cutting in some stuff, helping us out with some things. And that's where we did the first one. But yeah, as far as what exactly I can take away from Field and Forest, great facility. The big thing about it, you know, everybody's always says, oh, they got the hardest stuff in the world. I don't think, it's not that they, like, there are other facilities that have the same level of difficulty. It's not a matter of like, you know, this place is harder than this place. Like, there's a lot of places that if you want to create silly lines for comp rigs, they're there. And most people don't see them as even lines. You have to cut stuff because nobody considered putting a car on it, but they're there. What makes Field and Forest unique that I've never seen anywhere else in, you know, my travels is, and I'm not a geologist, I premise this by saying I don't know why it's like this. I don't know if it's glacial or what the whole deal is, but I can tell you that that piece of property, the 100 acres or whatever he's got there, has more hard rocks and big boulders and stuff like that in one place than I've ever seen anywhere. Like, it's a unicorn in that regard, because like most places, you know, like there's a section of hard stuff, like a little pocket of it. And then you got to go like 2 miles out to find that other pocket of hard stuff on the side of the mountain that you can use. There, it's like everywhere. The whole property is 100 acres of nothing but rocks. And if you break or whatever, you can like walk back to your vehicle, which is atypical for sure. That's not the norm. So, no, phenomenal facility, phenomenal people. Bob and Liza are great to work with. And I said, Bob's kind of, I think he's a lot like I am, so we get along pretty well.
So is there any chance we'll see you out our way? Or my way, I should say, like closer to Tennessee?
I get calls from landowners every month wanting us to do stuff all over, man. And I mean, that's not bragging. That's not me saying like, oh, look at me. It's just, it's true. I wish I could go to more of these places. It's tough because, like I said, we have these great people, right? And that is the key to what we do with XRock, is having those key people that help us and come with us everywhere. Those guys all have jobs. They're all people that, like, in order to do events, they have to take their personal time off and invest in this. And I would not be able to do an event like that if I can't get them out there. It just wouldn't work. So when guys say, hey, we want you in Utah and we want this and we want, like, I'd love to do that. I just don't know if it's feasible. And I also don't want to do an event if I can't pay out a reasonable payout. If I can't come up with a $10,000 payout and, you know, plus whatever on top of that for second and third place podium, then I'm not interested. So it depends on a bunch of stuff. I'm not opposed to it, but it would have to work for all parties. Let's put it that way. But it's absolutely something that I've talked about and that people talk to me about and are interested in, and I would love to see it happen. There's also the issue of having to cut in stuff that works. Like even at Field and Fire, like most people, those guys are used to like hardcore stuff. And it was still like, well, we need to cut in stuff that's harder than this for what we do with XRock. So guys like, you know, they call me and they say, yeah, I have these huge rocks and you got to come check them out. Or, you know, we got these impossible trails and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, send me pictures. Like if I go down there and take a look at this, like number one, it may not be useful for what we're doing because their idea of extreme and our idea of extreme are two very different things. And we may have to cut stuff. And if I have to go down there and cut stuff, like that's a lot harder if I have to travel 14 hours to go cut, you know, it's not something I can get done in a weekend or whatever. So, yeah, there's a lot of pieces and parts to it. What that needs is money. Honestly, it needs support and backing, and it's a chicken or egg scenario. But to get to those further away locations requires the competitors being more involved and taking it more seriously, and everybody working together, and the sport working together, and getting everybody, you know, on the same page. There's a lot to it. Everybody I know just thinks you can be like, well, we're going to go there and we're going to set up an event. I could do that, but it would be doomed to fail. It would not be a representation of what we're trying to do. So that said, I mean, are there any parks in your area that you think would be useful and have existing terrain set up and possibly spectator access for the type of stuff we do? Like really gnarly stuff?
I think that the finger trails at AOP would be worth a bit of research at the very least.
Okay.
That's like Little Caesars, Granny Templeton, those types of trails. They have a lot of interesting lines, and a lot of that stuff is pre-cut and extreme. And then as far as getting spectators, there's a green trail that runs right to them.
I know they do bouncer events and stuff down there. Yeah. I would assume some of that stuff could carry over.
Yes. But I'm going to give Cody the chance to ask it.
So, alrighty. So something that I usually ask almost every guest is for the people that are listening, that are kind of getting into rock crawling or trying to go to their next tire size, just try to get some input from different guests that we have. What is your favorite DOT tire for off-road use, and what is the absolute worst that you would tell somebody, never buy this, I will pop all your tires if you buy these tires, type tires? Like, what is the worst DOT tire for off-road use?
I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I don't know that DOT tires work all that much differently from one another. I mean, there's a couple that work better than others. Like sidewall strength is your big thing that you're going to see differentiating between DOT tires, right? And like how they behave based on sidewall flex and whatnot and punctures. So like pretty much all DOT compounds are close. tread blocks and, separation and squirm and stuff is similar because like they're all in the same rough area of hardness. There's a lot more differentiation when you start talking about stickies and how those perform. But like I would say that, I mean, you're asking for the worst tire or the best tire?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Both. Yep.
I mean, there's been some things, and I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm ever going to get sponsored by them, so it shouldn't be, me bad-mouthing anybody. But, like, I think some guy had federal Courageas on a vehicle when we were somewhere, and I was, like, absolutely flabbergasted at how poorly these tires worked. Like, I looked at it and I was like, man, like these are, I swear, like somebody greased the tires with butter when you weren't, like, it was just so now they didn't get holes in them or anything, and I guess they were cheap, but it was like, this is appalling just how piss poor these tires actually are performing. So those would be the one that, based on what I've seen. And what's funny is a lot of these things are like hit or miss, and a lot of things are made by the same company or whatever in different molds and off-brand stuff. And like, there's a lot of stuff that you'll get that's off-brand that works really well, and then you get some other cheap off-brand tire and it's terrible. But like across the board, most DOT tires are pretty similar. As far as which ones work the best, the regular bias ply SX Swampers. Now, I mean, that's a DOT tire, but it's not something that most guys would consider for like highway driving too frequently, just because it's a bias ply, like aggressive TSL type of tire. Those things work really well in the 36, 12.5, and 38, 12.5 sizes. They definitely are a good DOT tire option. The old Goodyear Wrangler MTR Kevlar, right? The ones that they're now discontinued. But those tires, not only were they big, they were like true to size for like a 35 or a 37. Biggest thing about those tires, they work incredibly well in the snow. And I have no idea why. I can't even put my finger on like what makes those tires work so well in the damn snow, but they do. They are super, super, super killer tires. A lot of the Nitto Toyo stuff works well. Cooper's, Goodyear, like there's a bunch of crossover, you know what I mean? But I would have to say, worst possible tire that I have ever seen. And, no offense to guys who love them. If you love them, then good for you. The Federal Courageia MT. Those tires are pretty sad tires and rocks.
So we're coming up on the the cutoff limit, if you will. We'll extend it a little bit because I want to get a quick answer on this. What is the deal with Paragon right now?
Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on with Paragon. There are multiple people. I don't know. I can't probably say a lot of this stuff on the air, honestly, and I'm not trying. It's not a cop-out, but it's like there's a lot of stuff that's in the works, and there's a lot of people involved. And what I can say is it has the potential to go one of multiple ways. I'd say there's probably 4 at least realistic ways that thing could go between state-run control and private entity control, and possibly some hybrid of the two. What my concern is, and it may not impact our ability to do events there or something like that directly, but I think I have a sneaking suspicion, and I guess I'll just say it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if it opens up as ATV and side-by-side only, and they don't want sizes in there. So let's just put it that way. Don't quote me on that. And there's a lot of things still up in the air, but I would not be at all surprised if depending on what of the, say, 4 to 5 scenarios play out, that would be probably the worst possible scenario for rec wheeling with full sizes, with guys like yourselves that want to get down there. Paragon's phenomenal, though. Like, we used to comp there years ago when Kyle Nosp ran it, who now runs the Badlands that he got from Troy Myers years ago, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. But Yeah, that place is another. Again, I'm not a geologist, but I guess it's probably because where like 4 mountains come up out of the. Well, have you guys ever wheeled there? I guess you were all too young to ever get out there. Yeah. So that property is cool. It was originally like, it's sizable, like 16,000 acres or something when it was first opened, I think is what they had, that they advertised. And there's some land use stuff that's kind of gray area and whatnot, but it's sizable regardless. I don't know how much of that is going to reopen, and there's also some DCNR stuff for conservation concerns and things that have to go into it because of the state side of how that's being played out. But yeah, that place has like 4 mountains that come together, and it just pushed big rocks. So there's like enormous rocks the size of houses, and like there's a slab wall all the way down off the one corner that's like a massive monolithic rock that's, you know, a couple 100 feet tall and you know, I don't know, a couple 100 feet wide times multiple, you know, quite a bit. Large stuff like that. It's a shame to see it not getting used, and it's a shame if it doesn't. Like, you know, you get back there and you see like things grow in that have been unused for years and things like that, and that's a shame to see. But yeah, that is a very useful, wonderful piece of property that I would love to see come back to use. And, you know, again, I certainly hope we'll be able to do comps there and arrange a way to do that, which may or may not be possible even if they don't allow full sizes, because that would be a unique one-off thing. But, you know, for rec wheeling guys, I'm sure everybody is hoping that they'll let full sizes in there.
So what's the over under on that thing being open a year from now for full sizes? Are we talking like
there's a lot of headaches with like control of land access and right-of-ways. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, reclaim problems, and some of them are circumvented by the fact that the state's involved. But then you got like the state has never taken on a project like this either, so that's again a double-edged sword. There's a lot of factors. They say they plan to have it open next summer in some capacity.
Oh, damn.
Whether or not that's going now, whether that's going to be for full, now they haven't said that. I'm pretty sure you will not find any inkling of anything anywhere that says that that's, you know, in writing going to be open for full size use. But they do say in writing that they plan to have it open by next summer. They may have changed, you know, since taken that down since I last saw, but at least that was the initial plan. And last I knew, I mean, it's bogged down with some stuff, but I could see it opening up in you know, the next year or so in some capacity. What capacity that is, if it's the whole thing and who's in control of it, is not anywhere near as cut and dry. But for sure, it'd be cool to see it back open and useful. That's for sure. It's absolutely one of the best facilities. Probably the favorite facility I've ever wheeled anywhere in the country, to be honest.
Wow.
Well, it's also my first, you know, like that's my home. Like that's the only thing we had when I was starting out years ago. So it's kind of like, that was it. And, you know, for comps, we had like Jellicoe and, you know, Badlands and, you know, other facilities like that. But as far as like rec wheeling locally to here during my era, that was it, man. Paragon that was it. That was the deal.
So gonna put the odds somewhere around that like 30% mark
for full sizes or being open. Like I think have it open in some capacity by the end of next summer. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I'll give that a 60-40 in its favor that they will have something or at least be close to it. As far as whether or not it's going to have full sizes, I mean, it's hard for me to put a number on that, but I'll be semi-skeptical. And the reason for that, like, hear me out here, guys. For every person that has a Jeep or that has any kind of rock crawler or whatever, they are, you know, an extreme minority. There's 1,000 guys or more that have a quad or a dirt bike or a side-by-side. When you look at things from a headache versus like investment return, you know, scenario standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And anytime you run, like, so AOA has been, frankly, I don't know how they get away with this as well as they do and don't have constant accidents, but pretty much every property that allows both ATVs and side-by-sides and full sizes, you end up with people getting killed. Right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
That guy's going 60 miles an hour on a Banshee on a dusty road and you can't see, and some guy's coming up in his Cherokee. And when those guys hit head on, like that's how the guy on the quad dies. There's do not pass go directly to deceased. So yeah, I mean, that's, I get it. Like it's a headache. It's an insurance problem. You look at Roush. That's why they have, what used to be Tower City Trail Riders is now Roush Creek Trail Riders. They separate all that sort of thing. Full sizes stay full. I highly doubt that it would ever be full size only, which is kind of what it was. At one point they did allow quads and then somebody died. So that then Paragon became full size only. But I can tell you that is probably 0%, I would say, chance of it being full size only. Chance of it being full size is allowed at all. I don't know. I guess I'll say 40% and be positive, but I'd say it's probably lower than that in my head. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess so the reason that we were asking is there was that big hubbub. We all did that survey, and we hosted an event Labor Day weekend called the Web Wheelers Ball, and that was on the radar for one of our events.
There's another off-road park they're trying to build further north than that. There's multiple, this area, they're working real hard to try to do what they're doing at Hatfield and McCoy and let like side-by-sides run on the road legally and drive into town and support local businesses. They're trying real hard to be like Moab of the East in southeastern Pennsylvania coal region, which is cool because it's like that's the only thing you can really do there. You know what I mean? That and big warehousing. There's a ton of big warehousing because it's right off of 81. But yeah, I mean it's a wonderful facility for doing that area in general, for doing that sort of thing. And yeah, if you guys can have a chance, you absolutely want to get out there for sure. Right now, I think you're going to be dealing with consultants, and you're not going to get anybody. You're not going to get any further than that.
You answered more questions than I was expecting on that regard, and I'm going to be honest. It sounds like we're going to have to play it by ear, but 3-4 months into next year, so like about 6 months from now or so, we're going to have to look at it and consider where we're at because we have to start.
You guys plan on doing this for the foreseeable future? Like, is this something you plan on having 3 years down the road type of thing? Or is
yeah.
Okay, then what I would say, in my professional opinion, is just don't even worry about it for next year. I would put that down for a 2-3 year out down the road project. And if you have something that's more surefire, I would focus on that for next season. That would be
great. We've been going to Roush. Roush has been good. There have been several factors that got it moved to Good Evening this year. It's a trial basis. If it doesn't work, the fallback was Roush or AOAA.
What's the format for this ride, if you guys don't mind explaining?
Show up, bring beer, go wheeling.
Yeah, it's kind of like just a big event where we go out and like my goal for this particular one is I'm going to try and hip hop around, or bebop is the Frankie term, around the groups and just go wheel with a bunch of people that listen, that we know. It's kind of like a self-indulgent get together, if you will.
Is it a public thing where like anybody, you sell tickets and anybody can show up?
Not even tickets.
Okay.
Show up. You just go to the
event weekend. Like there's no cost or anything other than what they charge you to get into the park type of thing. Like just show up.
Yeah,
show up.
It's not. The term event is a very loose term. It's just, hey, we're gonna be here. A bunch of people who have either been on or we've talked with, we've invited, or friends of ours, right, are coming. If you want to wheel with some cool people, then here you go. Here's the opportunity.
It only gets called an event because it gets written on my calendar. At that level.
So I guess you guys don't have like guided rides, and it's like you sign up for this, and we run this.
No.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Now, if somebody were to hit us up though, that was like new to a property or something, and like specifically like ask to wheel with us, I would say we probably would do something like that. Like, I'm not like, we're not gonna just leave them high and dry just because they're showing up.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you'd stick them in with somebody. I'm just saying you don't advertise like there's a blue group and a green group and that's run by this. Yeah, right.
Let's go find somebody who looks cool and has a similar size rig and go have fun.
Yeah, that makes it easy, man. I mean, at that point, you really don't have to account for a whole lot. You know what I mean? As long as the park is physically open to like have you show up that weekend, you're not really, you guys aren't specifically holding the ball for much of anything. It's just you're having guys, you're promoting for their park is basically what
that's exactly how it kind of works out. And like this year with the Good Evening trip, they're hosting a memorial ride the same weekend, and they're doing barrel racing, I believe, as a means to generate donations for the kids' facilities on the park. So we're just asking people to throw like $20 into the donation pool. You know?
Yeah. Well, what you guys said earlier, I know you said you guys got to get out of here, and I do too. But you asked how guys can get the local, regional, whatever rec wheeler can get into this. Sign up for our website, you know what I mean, our forum, get involved, show up for events, and honestly, share the stuff that we put out. Share the stuff that we promote. Like, that helps so much on social media and whatever, because I can sit there and talk about stuff till I'm blue in the face. It's like, high school party syndrome. Like, if you invite people to your party, it's like, well, who's coming and what's this? It's like nobody cares. But it's like if the captain of the football team says, oh, there's going to be this party, everybody's going to show up for that, right? You know what I mean? It's one of those sort of things. So having other guys share what we're doing and promote and say, hey, this is cool, you should go check it out. And I appreciate you guys having me on here and taking the time to let me speak my piece and interviewing me and all that kind of stuff, because this sort of thing helps. It's a platform. We do our own like live stream. Our social media gal Tiffany Andrews does interviews every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. She has either one of our sponsors on, or a competitor, or somebody in the off-road industry, and everybody was bugging me to come on that. You know what I mean? To be like, but that's not for me. That's for like our sponsors. Nobody needs to hear me ramble on my own stuff. We get exposure just by doing that thing. So I appreciate you guys having me on and giving me the platform to talk about what we do and occupy however long it's been of your guys' time at this point.
You're absolutely right. It's very when we rebooted the Web Wheelers Ball, it was originally a North American XJ kind of ish thing that involved a couple of the old timers from that and
Max Ball. Yes, that's old school.
So we rebooted that as a means of hanging out with a buddy of ours, Curtis, and trying to get Chris Ball back out there. And it was originally like 4 rigs the first year, and then suddenly it became like the next year was how many rigs? 20 or so?
You talking about Curtis Powell? Is that who?
No, Curtis. Curtis Barons.
The lesser Curtis. You probably haven't heard of him.
No, I don't know.
He doesn't wheel that much, but we still love him.
He's a very smiley guy, though. He's a very nice guy.
Right.
You can't miss him in a room. Towers overall.
6 foot, what, 8 in ginger?
No, I think he's only 6. He's only like 6'4".
Don't
He's not
flatter him so much.
Holy shit!
I don't know. He makes me feel short, and I'm 5'11", so whatever. But the long story short is, the next year that we held it, we had over 45 rigs, and now for this year, we had to have conversations with Good Evening about moving around cabins and whatnot to be able to get everyone in. So it's going to be a good show out this year.
Oh yeah, they're great people. I mean, Bobby Wood and Billy Jarrell and Chris Kuhn and all those guys. I don't know who exactly you guys are dealing with, but all of them are great. Amy, in the office, everybody's good. So.
Yep. So normally we leave on a quirky note, but instead, could you give us some dad advice to close out the podcast?
Dad advice, okay. Let's see. Don't push your kids to do things. That's my single biggest dad advice that I tell everybody, right? Like everybody messages me and is like, Hans, when are you going to have your kid in a rock crawler? He's just like you, like he's going to do this. And I said, nah, if he wants to do that, I'm going to let him do that. I'm not, you know what I mean? I don't want to push my kid. Like I love my dad to death, but I can tell you that we have some shared interests, but he's not in rock crawling. His interests and my interests are, quite far apart, and that's fine. And that's where I'm at with my kid. My kid actually bowls. He's like a bowling savant. It's amazing.
Oh shit, that's cool.
Yeah, he can he bowls over 200 routinely. Like he unlike sport patterns and stuff. I mean, the kid he's amazing. He started bowling at 4 years old, and he just knew how to do it. I mean,
wow.
Three.
I'm lucky if I get
tournaments,
70.
leagues, and all that stuff. Anyway, but that's funny because that's another sport that like people make fun of bowling or like whatever. It's like, dude, that's paying out $100,000 per event. So next time you make fun of bowling, like look at where we're at with rock crawling. The reason that professional cornhole is on TV and rock crawling isn't. So, but yeah, that's my dad advice for you fellas. If you have children, or maybe some of you already do, I didn't ask that question, but if you're planning on it or whatever, if you have a kid, as much as people pressure you to do it, or you may want to do it, don't try to make your kid into your carbon copy of yourself or live vicariously through your kid. Let your kid make his own journey and do what he wants to do, and let him turn into, as long as it's something that you can get behind, and it's reasonable and decent and not something you just absolutely are opposed to. Let him sort his stuff out and have his own journey and do his own thing and grow into the person that he or she is going to grow into. And you guys will have a better relationship that way. It'll be better for everybody. And who knows, they're probably better doing their calling than your calling. So
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. On that note, everyone have a good night, and we'll see you next week.